the talk story portion is the bridge that brings everybody together. And if there's anything that this world truly needs right now, it's to talk story more and less violence. And that's coming from a guy that's rocking the violence.
Who spent a lot of time perfecting the art of violence.
Right.
How's it? Aloha. My name is Vince Krause. Welcome to our pilot episode of Talk Story with Bakatare Inc., which thus far consists of me and my partner and guest here, Mark Kurano.
Hey.
Hopefully he will be my long-term partner moving forward with the podcast, but he is also guest number one.
Yeah.
So welcome to the scene.
G1 or GP.
That's right.
Stands for guinea pig.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the nice thing is there will only be 5 people watching this ever in total. So
if we're lucky, if the marketing plan hits hard.
That's only if all 3 of my family members actually agree to.
Yeah, maybe my cat.
Yeah, right, exactly.
The tribute shirt here, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's Kombu. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you actually had a shirt made for Kombu.
Well, not made. It's actually an Amazon cheap stuff.
Oh, okay.
Sort of, the two worlds came together, you know.
But it's an homage.
Yeah, it is indeed. I figured for the first episode, I'd rock that. Yeah.
And this being the first episode, we should probably provide a little context and backstory as to what we're trying to accomplish here and how this came about. I guess a little bit of history. The good news is this is probably going to be, even in this beautifully professional environment with our lack of experience doing this should be the worst episode ever, right? Theoretically, it should only get better from here.
Well, lack of experience per se on this particular format, but like when it comes to television and radio and that type of stuff, you were involved with me for a long time. I mean, in fact, our relationship, our friendship goes back 25, 30 plus years.
That's true.
Anyway. So really no worries there. But where did we leave off? Because I think we were talking a little bit about...
before the technical difficulties arose, we were talking about the term Hapa and what it means. And you know, I was mentioning that I was born in Japan, but I have a Japanese mother and a white father. And we were talking last night on the phone about how the sort of terminology for or being Hapa has come back in vogue, or I don't know, maybe it never really
went out of vogue. So that was our conversation yesterday, and like it's funny that you didn't know about it, but that could be a age demographic thing, but apparently being Hapa is trending now. And funny part about it was, you know, when I first started coming to the mainland, I mean, this is decades ago, if you ever dropped the term Hapa, people didn't really know what that meant. Maybe halfy they would use, or they would say, you know, this, that, or whatever, part this or part that. Because Hapa, as you know, is a Hawaiian word for half, right? And that was used to describe the initial like missionaries taking a bride that was Hawaiian, and, you know, their child would become, you know, half. So they used the term Hapa for that. But then, like most things in Hawaii, things get grandfathered into the language, which became part of Pidgin, which became Hapa. But long story short, I always used to joke around because Hapas tend to always be good looking and smarter and all of that type of stuff. So, you know, it was a superpower. But now there's an actual movement and trend that I see, especially on social media, where Hapas, large amounts of them here, especially here in Southern California, and even in NorCal, you'll see groups get together or I should even say in any large metropolitan. So even in New York.
That's a for real thing. When you were saying that, I kind of thought you were half joking. I was like, that's camp.
No, it's funny because
there's like meet up and Eventbrite groups or whatever it is.
You know, but it's funny though, because like even knowing you and having a lot of Hapa friends and maybe even dating a couple back in the day, you know, it was interesting because they were able to fit in, but not fit in at the same time. It was like traveling between two cultures, which I think is tremendously interesting and a little melancholy too, and a little lonely and sad. And because of my like quirky / intense personality, I tend to isolate myself even when I don't want to. And,
fair point.
You know, and even my background was I moved a lot when I was young because of my parent. You know, my dad took a lot of different jobs and was moving, you know, us around. So similarly, I have that type of aloneness, but trying to always adapt things. So I guess I bonded in that way to the Hapa disposition. But yeah, long story short, apparently there's a lot of Hapas that feel the same way. And so they've created groups because it's a unique type of upbringing. It's a unique culture and experience, right? So yeah, if you were to even Google Hapa organization or something like that on Google, and I haven't done it, but my guess would be You're gonna find like a million different like.
If the podcast becomes successful, we'll have our own like sort of engineer in the background. At some point, we can have him Google things like during the episode and fact check for us, right?
In fact, I think I even said maybe you should call this Hoppa Talk.
Right.
I will tell you, like, although I'm not Hoppa,
right.
According to Ancestry.com, that I paid for
I just did this recently.
Right. There is a small element of Ecuadorian blood in me.
In you, really?
Right. So I have every reason to
so what is your
Espanol, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That's why you've got 9 million days on Duolingo or whatever it is.
That's right. I have 7% reason to bust out the Spanish. So I've been on Duolingo.
Is that what it said? You're 7% Ecuadorian?
Well, I think it was.
So what was it, like 93% Japanese?
14%. Like my uncle, so that would be. I just divided that in half because I'm but it doesn't necessarily work out.
But so you're primarily Japanese, like
I primarily,
and most of your life thought you were 100% Japanese, right?
Oh, you know, when you start going into the whole, I think they call it like Suma River Valley. You know, like they take the different tribes of where they came from. Apparently, there's a lot of South Korean.
Okay.
Yeah, genes within the Japanese, and I'm one of those that folds with a lot of that.
Which is a hot topic in our generation.
You
know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is like, you know, okay to talk about, but I feel like, you know, we grew up at when things were a little bit more racially tense between the Asian communities. Yeah. I think it's great that it's become so mainstream now. It's very normal to meet someone today that's like half Japanese and half Korean or whatever it is, like some kind of, you know, mixed Asian race. But back in the day, if you met someone like that, you're like, oh, your parents are so progressive.
Hey, no, like you go back. I mean, we're not that old, but we're kind of old. Like I'm a product of the '80s. You know, like you know, I grew up in the '80s, and if you take the '80s for example, you know, I'm regarded as Japanese by last name by most of my genes and whatnot. And if I were to and I did bring home a Korean girlfriend, you know, the mom be like, oh, don't do that. You know what I mean? Like it was a big deal. Jump to today.
Right.
I'm extremely grateful to the Koreans, and there's a few reasons for it, which we may go into or may not go into.
Yeah.
But I will tell you one thing is that thanks to groups like BTS and Korean dramas, the Asian stock on the coattails of the Korean boy band movement
being Japanese or partially Japanese
have brought like the Asian male, which we could probably talk about this too, and you could probably lean on this, which is, I'd say, the most dismissed minority group that because of due to success and all those different types of things don't get necessarily the credit for some of the obstacles that we have to overcome, of which, you know, where I fall on that. I don't really care. I think everything should be meritocracy, but that's not to dismiss some of these obstacles. But thanks to the Koreans, particularly.
Well, you and I had a bit of
all got benefits now, you know.
Yeah. But you and I also had a bit of I don't know if this exactly ties into what you're saying, but I feel like people that did grow up Asian, you know, experienced being part of a minority if they're in the mainland. And when we say mainland, we're referring to the continental U.S., the lower 48, so to speak. That's what we refer to, the continental U.S., when we grow up in Hawaii. But growing up in Hawaii, the Asians were the majority. So it's not like I experienced a whole lot, especially Hoppas too. Like we were a dime a dozen. Right. If I say I'm half Asian and half white to someone out here, it's like, oh, that's so exotic, or you know, it's unique or something. But where I'm from, it's like I said, it's dime a dozen. And
it was dime a dozen even from the 80s. But if you start going back to the 70s and 60s and 50s, for example, like my dad's time, like that, it was actually embarrassing because they would consider like Hoppas war babies.
Right.
And then it had a really bad stigma to it.
Toy dogs.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, back then they were even splitting hairs between Okinawans and Japanese, and it was all World War II type of scenarios. And, you know, it's interesting. And if you take a look even generationally where things have evolved and gone, like now, you almost can't find a guy that without a full sleeve, you know, Asians with that. And back in the day, a lot
of white people too.
Oh yeah, well back in the day, for like especially Japanese.
Oh yeah,
and Korean.
That was the Yakuza sleeve, right? Like,
well, it was not so much that. Like in World War II, it was an embarrassment because the Japanese would tattoo everybody.
Like as a punishment.
Yeah, like it was. Yeah, like especially the women. You know,
it's like a scarlet letter more than it was a.
It was absolutely
badge of honor.
Scarlet letter. Yeah, it was to basically make sure that people knew. You know, it wasn't used to
you were defeated and
But with all of that, man, here we are today talking. You know, like
we've already got walked around the
subject. And like, hey, look, the Asian male can show up on a dating app, and you know, he's not necessarily getting swept in the wrong direction.
Takes a little bit longer to swipe left.
Hey, thank you, BTS.
Yeah.
You know, But
I'll take that.
yeah, who wouldn't? I might not need my motorcycles anymore. Anyway, so
Well, we kind of strayed off the topic a little bit, but I'll try to bring it back to we originally were talking about why we decided to start this podcast. I was explaining that I was a Hapa, born in Japan. Actually, funny side story. Again, you brought up the Ancestry.com thing with your family.
Right.
I recently did the 23andMe. I kind of didn't really care so much about what my ethnic mix was. Being mixed already anyway, and growing up in Hawaii is just kind of everybody's, whatever.
Yeah.
I was more interested in just like the genetic health markers and that kind of stuff. But, my backstory was I had been told all my life, well, real quick, I'll trace my steps. So I was born in Japan, but like I said, white father, Japanese mother. We left Japan before I was even a year old. I was born in Japan, a U.S. citizen, because I guess it's very hard to have dual citizenship in Japan. And since my father was an American citizen and we were leaving Japan shortly anyway, they just declared me a U.S. citizen from birth. Moved to Guam before I was a year old, American territory. My white father spoke fluent Japanese with a perfect Japanese accent, probably better than my Japanese mother did. She would even attest to that and claim that. So they only spoke Japanese to me until I was 5 years old, at which time, because we're now living in an American territory in Guam, I think there's a funny story about me going to my first day of kindergarten and thinking I'm retarded because, and I don't care if I'm not allowed to say that or not, but I'm going to.
I think it's okay.
I'm too old.
Yeah, there's a few words that are back on the
right.
menu. Yeah.
Me going to school and thinking I'm some kind of alien or something because I don't understand what anyone's saying because they're all speaking English. So anyway, they I started learning English at that point when I was about 5 years old, and so have my foot in both cultures from a language context as well. My parents get divorced when I think I was about 8, and my mother, her mother, and myself moved to Hawaii at that point, and so grew up in Hawaii ever since then. And the original reason I brought that up was to talk about.
Well, it helps to define this show, right?
Right. Well, okay. So being born half, white in Japan. Even if your father speaks perfect fluent Japanese, he's still a white guy, so he's an outsider. He's gaijin no matter what, right? And even me being born in Japan, I'm immediately considered an outsider, especially back then in that generation. So have always known what it feels like to not completely be accepted, in any one specific group. And then moving to America after that, I didn't experience it, I would say, not in any kind of like a harsh way. Like I said, I feel like growing up in Hawaii, being mixed Asian or full Asian or several different mixed groups, it was very common. So, but still, that sort of theme of never completely belonging to one group and kind of being able to fit in anywhere, sort of, I'd make a great international spy maybe, always stuck with me. And thematically, that has carried on with me throughout the course of my life. The first thing I ever became truly super passionate about was skateboarding, and I ended up getting pretty far, a lot further than I ever thought I would have in that universe. I was never a professional skater. I was a sponsored amateur when I was a kid. Hung my board up, so to speak, and decided to get a college degree instead of trying to go the pro route. But immediately after college, had an opportunity to work in the industry and ended up getting to help run what became the biggest manufacturer and distributor of skateboard hard goods and soft goods in the world at the time. Exponential growth. And so it was a lot of fun getting to wear all the different hats that go along with that. During that time, maybe even before that time, always had a passion for the martial arts. Got involved in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu not till like the first UFCs came out did I have like a semi-private group class with hoists that my friends had set up in Helson's garage off of Kalani, near Kalani High School. But then didn't touch it again for several years. And then in 99, started training at Higan Machado's Academy in Torrance when I was living out here working in the skate industry, and developed a lifelong passion for that as well. So I think 27 years of jiu-jitsu now at this point. So I've was super passionate about and had a love for the activity of skateboarding. A lot of the friends I've made in that universe, I still have to this day. There was always a lot of tight camaraderie in that group. Never felt like I completely fit in. Growing up, I love the act of it and the sort of the rebellious nature and the independent expression that went along with it. Having had done team sports prior to that, and sort of evolving away from that, but wasn't ever really completely like the punk rock stereotype skateboarder rebel who stereotypically back then, like, you know, had this very punk rock attitude and listened to punk rock music and got in trouble at school all the time, and, you know, focused on just the act of skateboarding. Whereas I was like, nah, I'm gonna go to school and get good grades and that kind of thing. So I never really completely fit in that universe. Martial arts, I wasn't ever really like the super, like, I guess, you know, a meathead, tough guy, jock type of person. Same thing in like sports. Prior to that, in team sports, I wasn't the super team player all the time, but did well in that setting. And then, you know, went on to have a lot of experience helping build companies and sales organizations and sales leadership and that kind of stuff. So I've had my foot in a bunch of different worlds, but never really felt like I completely 100% belonged in any of them, so to speak. But because of that, I've had the great fortune of having met some really great people in all those different universes and developing some lifelong relationships. And I think a lot of those relationships are worth exploring and sharing with other people that are either interested in those universes, or even if they're interested in one of the other ones and happen to see an episode from that one. I think that there's a lot of interesting conversations to have, things that you could potentially learn, a lot of topics that I'm interested in that I would like to explore further and potentially share with people. So that was sort of the birthing of the idea to be able to have a platform to have these kinds of conversations. And with your background in Fighters Club TV and the experience you've had sort of in this universe from a quasi-related level, you know, with it being public access TV back in the day and that kind of stuff, and the great conversations we've had for decades now. You've been a mentor to me. You've also sort of led by example, and I've watched how great you are at this kind of stuff. And the one thing that sort of is lacking in this for me is I've never really had the desire to be in front of a camera or speaking into a microphone. And not that I'm like worried about getting famous or anything, but I've never desired that kind of attention. Yeah. But I think I am pretty good at facilitating and having a lot of these kinds of conversations. All right.
Well, there's a lot you just threw out there that's kind of awesome.
I just spoke for 5 minutes straight without taking a breath.
Well, no, and I think it actually ties into like why talk story. Mm-hmm. And what you described there, although we don't have identical experiences, what we do have are very similar human experiences of being isolated. And what was it that you did that brought or helped you to bridge those things that separated you from, I don't know, maybe social success and just being liked in general, or at least in your heart, feeling like you're being liked, right? So could touch on that a little bit. I think an interesting one was that you said because of the language barrier, right? That you kind of felt like an outsider, and like immediately that like resonated with me because I was born on Oahu and then grew up in Kailua for a while, that type of thing. My mom being an English teacher and my dad, being a pilot back then was like, they wouldn't allow any pidgin in the house. So it had to be standard English. That doesn't go so well when you move in first or kindergarten or first grade to Kauai.
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah. So you
I didn't know that. You lived in Kauai too.
I did. Elementary school, all the way through elementary school, because my dad stopped being a pilot. I'm not going to go into that as to why, but...
Your dad was a pilot too?
Yeah, my dad was
How much overlap do you have with like the Guyanita universe?
Yeah, well, a lot, actually. So my dad was a pilot for Aloha, no, Hawaiian, Hawaiian. And then my mom was a flight attendant for Aloha.
Oh, okay.
And that's kind of how they met.
Wow. All right.
But my dad also liked it, so his pilot.
Suck him down.
Yeah, similar. I'm in that industry, as you well know, right? Yeah. But yeah, so but it ended the career for him flying. And with that, he took a job with the telephone company and we moved to Kauai. The Kailua brought up standard English speaking, type, hi, my name's Mark, nice to meet you type of thing, right? That doesn't go so well in a plantation.
Brought us in Kauai.
That first day with, feeling that isolation you did, you know what I mean? But in Kauai, that meant basically your lunch money was up for grabs. And then that kind of like jump all the way to the future. Like now that shaped me because I had to learn to fight like fast.
Right.
And then got enrolled in martial arts and that whole thing. But there's, like I said, there's a lot of commonality between your experience and what I think a lot of us experience, especially in Hawaii being a melting pot of cultures, and then all, having the violence element. Like if you notice, a lot of people say, man, don't mess around in Hawaii because like everybody knows how to fight.
Yeah.
It's kind of true.
I've explained, if I can interject.
Yeah.
This is a recurring theme for me that seems to have come up in a lot of conversations I've had in getting to know people outside of Hawaii. And I try to explain to them, I don't have a dog in the fight of trying to advocate for whether or not it's a good thing or not, but at least in our generation, growing up in Hawaii, it was very much a warrior culture. If you were a boy, our age, growing up in Hawaii, you were going to fight whether you wanted to or not.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just a matter of truth. Whether you want to say that that's a good thing or a bad thing is up for debate. I get it. I don't really, I think everybody's entitled to their opinion when it comes to that. But I think there was some value in growing up in that sort of culture because, what I encounter this a lot with people that are adults today that I feel like have grown up with more entitlement and less, I guess, accountability and consequences. Growing up in that culture in Hawaii taught me like what sort of the boundaries were, what the limits were. And I have a big mouth. I'm a smart ass. I've gotten myself in trouble by running my mouth in the past, but it teaches you like when's a good time to shut up. You know what I mean? And what sort of like the limits are. And it teaches you that like, there are consequences for your actions. Like if I act too stupid, I'm going to catch a beating. Whether or not you want to argue whether that's that kind of corporal punishment is justifiable or has any value or not, or is good. For me, it was. I taught me, basically to know what the limits were and how to be cool, basically. You know what I mean?
Which leads
or be
into,
cooler.
well, talking story, because like in Hawaii, the whole point of that casual just banter back and forth. And, we always start with like, where'd you graduate from? There's certain things we go through. Yeah. So to help us bond, because the talk story portion of Hawaii culture is an important one because it offsets the whole violent aspect to it. And like, if you want to see where the violent aspect has gone in terms of like successful, like thriving and whatnot, you take people like the Inoue brothers, right? Egan and Ensign, who grew up 70s, 80s, right? Like that's the heat of fight time. Like, even though like there's so many stories even about Egan, he's a professional racquetball, handball, that type of thing.
Little champ,
like,
right?
Surfer, that whole thing. But there's also stories where people messed with him, and due to legal reasons, we're not going to go into the details. Yeah. And then of course Ensign as well. Like he's one of those guys that I'm like what they would call in Japanese his kohai, right? Like one of the guys that he may have not even remembered my name, but I'd always watch him at baseball practice or whatever, and just admire him because he was always just incredibly athletic, big for an Asian dude. And he was like the defender of all things. Like people think he's like psycho back then, but actually he wasn't. He was like, if he saw what he considered an injustice, and he's still that to this day, he would go in full fight mode. And long story short, it produced great fighters because these people, both of those brothers, evolved into
legends.
Some of like legends and some of the best MMA fighters that will arguably come from Hawaii. Then you take a big name like BJ Penn. Guess where he was born and raised and grew up? Hilo boy. That's pretty much fight central, right? Like that if you had to pick one area in Hawaii that's like you gotta scrap,
right.
That's pretty much it. And another area that you know really well produced another champ, like you take Max Holloway.
Why and I
wonder where Max Holloway's from, right? Exactly. So like you take all of these areas in Hawaii that are uber violent, right? Like if you grew up there, the fight's brought to you. You don't have to look for it because you're going to get one. It's coming, right? Or you're going to get your lunch money taken, and you still might wind up fighting, even losing your lunch money. But when you look at those areas too, one of the things that really represent those areas, like if you sit down, it's so country and rural in a way. A talk story conversation busts out no matter where you go. Like, for example, I could be and for those that don't know, like Hawaii Kai or Portlock, that area. If I'm in Safeway, people mind their own business. They got things to do. They're busy. They've got a work day that they're doing. So you're standing in line at Safeway. People are keeping their eyes to themselves, kind of wanting to get through that line as fast as possible. But you go to like Tamura's in Waianae or Waianae store, that type of stuff, where you go to KTA in Hilo and you're in a line waiting, to check out your grocery. your kupuna behind you or the grandma or the auntie in front be like, hey boy, where you from? That kind of stuff, right? Like
you run into the community and the village aspect of it a lot more.
Talk story starts immediately. And I think like this podcast, why I'm so interested in and like appreciate being part of it is because the talk story portion is the bridge that brings everybody together. And if there's anything that this world truly needs right now, it's to talk story more and less violence. And that's coming from a guy that's rocking the
right.
violence.
Who spent a lot of time perfecting the art of violence.
right. But all of those things, and it's funny also that I think you'd agree that people that have practiced and have refined violence to the point where they've had to use it maybe all the way to the point of like, where it goes, choose not to do that.
Yeah.
The most.
Well, yeah.
Crazy how that works.
Well, I think that comes from a lot of the guys that we, maybe not firsthand experience ourselves, but see out there in the world who are like acting tough at a bar or whatever like that. It's usually because, and this is another point that I was going to make about why it was good to grow up in the culture that we grew up in. They have never had to prove themselves, so they may still have that lingering question about their own manhood or machismo, or however you want to put it. You know what I mean? Like, I've never really been tested. Like, am I? Would it, if push came to shove, like, would I be able to handle myself?
A lot here on the mainland, more, but especially like in Southern California.
And the complete polar opposite of that is the guys that I used to spend a lot of time with when I first moved back to Hawaii after the skate industry, when I was training at like the HMCs and the Novanyas and the Helson affiliates of the world. These guys, did this all day long. They were fighting in Super Brawl at the time and Icon and Kingdom or whatever it was called, whatever iteration it was. They weren't interested. They didn't have to like test themselves to find out if they were tough. Yeah. I remember when I had that little T-shirt company, I sponsored this local weekly event. It was $5 pitches and rubber slippers.
It was called Raise Gear.
It was called Raise Gear.
It was an incredible brand.
I saw someone wearing one of those shirts the last time I was in Hawaii, just a few months ago.
I still have a Raise
old
hat.
Man.
I should send you a picture of it. It's up on my wall.
Anyway, so we sponsored this weekly event, and I never really had brought any of the fighters that I sponsored with me because there were other brands involved, like Soldier and my DJ friend who was the promoter or whatever. And one of the weeks, they convinced me to bring a bunch of my fighter friends. The promoter's all concerned because I'm bringing all these professional fighters with me, and so they're being totally cool to them when we arrived, but they just kind of like gave them the sort of like the speech before they let us all in. He's like, hey man, just so you know, we know you guys are all badasses and tough guys or whatever it is, but we don't want any trouble. And one of my friends that was, one of the better, I think this was Dave the Chinaman Jung who said this in response. One of the most, him, one of the sweetest people on the planet, Captain Aloha. Yeah. He was confused. He was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, like we don't want any fights or anything. Then I was like, oh, you mean like fights? Like for free? You know what I mean? Like, do this stuff all day long. The last thing I want to do is get in a fight for, you know what I mean?
Collecting a check.
Yeah, we came here because you guys, I heard there was $5 beers. So.
It's absolutely true.
So they got nothing to prove, you know what I mean? Which surprised, I just thought it was so funny because it so clearly like showcases like the dichotomy in those two different sort of, the polar opposites.
Yeah, and well, speaking of dichotomy, so then you take the example of the folks that haven't had or were never really truly exposed to like at least that level of corporal violence. Right. Maybe they got, a pinch on the cheek if they had sworn when they were young. That was the limit of things, like were settled, like gentlemen with words, but not Hawaii, as you well know, right? And so here I am jumping into, the corporate America in Southern California, and I can tell the difference. Like you can smell it immediately. And it's funny because it's not like it doesn't exist here in SoCal. Like I'll give you an example. You're in the skate community. The folks that I know in the skate community here actually did throw down. Yeah. As bad, if not in some cases, especially in the beach cities. Like take, for example, I have a friend in Oceanside, right? Like, you know who he is, Hans, right? So he was telling me some of the stories that sound identical to like Hawaii type of situations, when it comes to fighting. And then, of course, some of my Hispanic friends that grew up in maybe the lower, socio-demographic economic areas that, like they have very similar, if not worse, stories than me. But there's a common thing with all of those types. We're all very, very cool, calm, and collected now, and not wanting to put ourselves into situations like that. On the flip side, when I go into corporate functions and whatnot, where there's a melting pot, there's always a couple of us that have that. I mean, it's not like you wear it like a badge. It just is who you are, right? I mean, there's a reason why even to this day I train. Like I like to think that I always tell you, like, one more round in me, right? Even regardless of my age, I train hard, I diet hard, and that whole thing just to keep the ability to pull the life out of somebody one last time. That's pretty much it. I need to know if I need to go pull the life out of somebody, I can do it. Not that I look for it or want it, but I need to
having been on the receiving end of a lot of sparring sessions with you, I can attest to the fact that you probably still very much have the ability to do that.
But from a security, like I would not feel comfortable being in public knowing that I can't do that.
Right.
That's because I know what could come at me. But the flip side, like I said, if people have never had to feel that way, like having, as a kid, having your lunch money taken or being mobbed or, all of those type of things, if they've never had that experience,
right,
they don't, I used to think it was a human condition, but it's not. It's something that is definitely environment, because if they don't have that feeling, they act a different way, a little more disrespectful.
Do you think
a little more poking the bear type? They don't know what's waiting for them on the other end of that.
Do you think it's because of what I was saying earlier, like just because they're wondering and still have that question about themselves?
It's because of course I'm sure deep down, if you were to really peel that onion, back, they have that insecurity, and it's never been tested, it's never been proven. So of course, any male, especially, I would say, some females, but mostly males, like, will have that insecurity, and then the insecurity, whether they want to admit to it or not, and that's part of the insecurity, right, manifests itself in less desirable character traits.
Right.
I think it leads to weaker character. And that's why every parent should put their kids in martial arts from when they're young, because especially females, because usually females won't want to do it once it's adolescence. But it teaches you, being in martial arts from a young age, what's potentially there waiting, like it's possible, and what you could do to somebody. So then you realize, let's not go there. It's just
I think it gives you a good solid foundation of not just, all the tenets that they tell you about, like learning discipline and learning how to, but also gives you that sort of sense of self-worth or self-respect, I guess, like a confidence in yourself.
You mean
like
the ability to pull?
Like I can take care of myself. Yeah, I can take care of myself a little bit. You feel a little more confident. Historically, I thought martial arts almost did a disservice by making you overly confident. This was pre-UFC, right? The whole birth of the UFC was to prove like which art was the most effective. And a lot of us did stuff, and we thought like, well, as long as I know this, like, there's no one can mess with me, in the universe. And then you find out, like, I was patently wrong. I was completely like.
We could even expound on that and say that any martial art that doesn't allow for hard sparring safely will never allow you to.
You can't really test it, right?
Really feel like you've tested it.
You can't really
So
know.
you always have a little bit of insecurity, in that department. Whereas, I mean, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is not the only one, but it's a great example of a martial art that allows you to pretty much go as hard as you want and without getting necessarily injured.
I feel like I've seen that evolve into sort of two different camps too. I feel like the camp where it is very practical and effective for self-defense, like if something happened out in the universe, out in the streets, so to speak. But there's I think a more refined version of that has become the sort of the sportive, I guess, vehicle and branch of jiu-jitsu.
Right.
You see a lot of the fancier.
Well, that's actually a trending thing that's always, I mean, prior to, and we were going to talk
in any sport
a little later, but prior to social media, it was always something that was argued on the forums, the way that they do it after the creation of the internet, right? And but when you really think about it, whether it's the sport aspect of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or it's the self-defense or the fighting portion of it, depends really like who you're going against, right? Like if someone's never trained, like for example, one could argue that the sport aspect of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu isn't always just sitting to your butt and butt scooting, but I think it's fair to say that having a double leg takedown in the sport aspect is probably a necessary thing to develop if you want to be successful. So if you know from the sports aspect how to do a double leg takedown, how to eliminate any up kicks and stuff, which you would learn to do by just hip pressure, and how to knee to the belly and mount. You have enough to pretty much pull the life out of somebody, even with the sport aspect. Now, if somebody is doing something very specific and only that thing that would leave your head open for stomps and all of that, of course, but
that's kind of what I was
referring to. But to even develop that, you would still have had to go through the initial training.
Fair point. Yeah.
So usually the argument,
you got to learn the basics, right?
So usually the argument comes between people that are splitting hairs.
Yeah, and I get that. Yeah, I get where you're going with that.
Yeah, didn't mean to derail that a little
No,
bit,
no,
but
no.
like what I do want to give credit to are to sport practitioners of a lot of different
Oh, I think the
martial arts.
nuance and the technical ability involved in
Yeah.
getting that good at that aspect of it is remarkable. Like, it almost sounds like I'm just being bitter old guy. I was like, I'm just going to learn the basics and,
No,
like,
but in theory,
pinch my
and
knees in guard. And
yeah, I get what you're saying, and like so. If you pull the fight with the wrong person, let's say the guy's training mixed martial arts, and he's
right.
an amateur fighter, and he already has like wrestling and boxing and that type of stuff, and then you're just a sport Brazilian jiu-jitsu player. Yeah, see you later. You're gonna get
Yeah,
the life
short
stomped
night.
out of you. Yeah, for sure. But I mean, just the random guy, like you watch a lot of these videos online. Let's say a guy has is picking a fight with you, some bum or whatever it might be. Chances are, if you're even a sport player, you're going to be able to just absolutely dominate that person. But on this same topic, people have also said, jujitsu versus this and that or whatever. But I would argue, like one of the martial arts that got really commercialized and gets ragged on a lot, which is Taekwondo to this day and age, right? Because people are like, if you're going to learn kicks, learn Muay Thai. It's like, well, it depends really on what your goal is, right? Like, are you going to go and step into the octagon with the unified rule set? And that's another argument or a discussion we can have, like
Right.
how do rule sets change the type of successes in fighting? But for example, Taekwondo old school, that was a big thing in Hawaii. Like some of the best fighters I knew before Helson arrived in Hawaii were actually either from Kalakaua Gym, Waianae Boxing Club, or Taekwondo schools. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is boxers tend to have to keep, like stepping in, stepping lane. They're basically marching in, or like
if you could kick, you have more distance.
right. And a Taekwondo player or Kyokushin Karate guy is trained to smash that leg. So boxers who would have a heck of a time with like
Getting
Taekwondo
close
guys
enough
because
to
they would get
land the strike.
they would get leg kicked. Right. This is even before Muay Thai really took off. And then like my Taekwondo instructor, and yeah, I have a little bit of bias here because like I trained my kicks with Taekwondo and not Muay Thai primarily, although I have a bit of Muay Thai, through Coach Mike and stuff. But Taekwondo has range, a lot of range stuff, which I like. I like that about karate as well because it allows you to hit from a farther distance and maybe stop.
Especially like point fighting systems, right?
Right.
Like those
And-
guys are in and out so
Yeah,
quickly.
and I was always like, I don't know, I don't kick as hard as you. I'd tell my my instructor that, and he's like, well, it's basically look at your shin or where we're kicking with as like a baseball bat, which it essentially is. I go, if I hit you full blast in the head with a baseball bat, or I hit you just kind of hard with a baseball bat, results pretty much the same,
Sucks
right?
either way.
Yeah, you're still gonna get like rocked if I put it on your head. So with that said, when it comes to different fighting styles, depending on what you're up against and who you're up against, they could be equally effective. So
This
I
has
guess-
evolved into sort of a conversation about
Yeah.
MMA in general, but I think it also matters what is sort of in vogue at the time. Like, everyone got involved with the sort of the trifecta was like, you had to have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you had to have a good clinch game, like some kind of wrestling and striking, whether it's boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, whatever it was. But if everybody starts learning Muay Thai, then you start learning how to defend that, and it becomes harder to be effective at that single variable, right? So if you bring in Taekwondo at a time when nobody's really focusing on that, and all of a sudden you have a whole new range of weapons that people are not prepared to face. So I think it seems like potentially, like more, MMA at least, will always be sort of fresh and evolving, and you introduce a new variable that wasn't in vogue or trendy with everyone at the time, and then it becomes trendy with everyone because everyone starts doing it. You know what I mean? And you could just keep like sort of filtering in like different fighting styles. And
So yeah, I mean, well, this actually ties directly into like sport versus like reality, right? So interesting that you bring this up because I would argue, and I think it's primarily based on this: it's rule set versus no rules.
right.
So when you have no rules, certain things tend to win, and then it is scenario, right? Multiple opponents, are weapons involved, and all of that type.
Right.
But let's just call it unarmed combat, and we can argue all day long or discuss all day long, and I'm sure people would want to argue this. But like the first UFCs were, even though some would argue that it was Horian Gracie's way of showcasing from a business aspect,
It was a promotional vehicle. It was genius.
promotional vehicle. It still did reflect and demonstrate like what happens
Right.
if someone's not necessarily trained, with grappling,
Right.
like, or to deal specifically with what at the time was called Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, but Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like a submission grappling type of a approach, which is self-defense based. And then what happens when you're just pure striking and you have no takedown defense and that type of thing. That the result, even in this day and age, would be the same. And then you start adding in rule sets. So as the rules were added for the right reasons, because MMA wouldn't be where it's at today if it was still no.
Right. It needed to become a business that
it needed to become a sport.
Yeah, and it needed to be exciting, and I get where you're going with this. The rule set doesn't necessarily favor the pure grappler.
Well, yeah, because even when I dabbled in it back in the day, like the gloves weren't regulated. You know, those Wanos that we fought weren't basically knuckle protectors. I mean, you want to talk about Dave the Chinaman Jung? Like, look at some of the stuff he fought in, all the way to old Pride rule things. And you know, if the blend of it, they allowed head stomps, and I think even early days of Super Brawl, it was basically everything.
Right.
It was like, oh, well, you know, in Pride, you can't use elbows, but you can do head stomp. Like back in the old days when TJ Thompson was rolling this stuff from Gussie Lamar's, it was UFC 1, maybe worse than that. You know? Although they didn't allow like fish hooking and eye gouging. I think those were the only two things, and groin strikes. Those were the only three rules, right? And
groin strikes were even allowed in the first UFCs. Remember, like
they were,
Keith Hackney.
They were. But I think after that, like those,
that quickly went.
You couldn't eye poke, you couldn't fish hook,
eye poking and fish hooking was always,
and you couldn't groin strike. Those were the only three rules for a long time until different organizations implemented certain things. Like the reason I understand that Pride, which was like, I think the best organization ever. Didn't allow elbows was because elbows weren't necessarily knocking out people. What they did do was cut people.
I just was watching an interview with Boss Rutan last night, and he espoused the exact same point. He's like, it's kind of bullshit. Like it cuts people and it forces you to stop a fight because of blood.
Yeah.
But if this was the streets, like that wouldn't necessarily really be the end of a fight.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? You want to see the end of a fight. So hence foot stomps legal on the ground, because in the streets, if you did stomp someone's head into the dirt, then fight's over. You know what I mean?
So Pride didn't allow it just because they didn't, well, from an entertainment factor, didn't want early stoppages due to cuts and that type of thing. I'm sure there's a bunch of Muay Thai folks, and I mean, I could even argue the other side that like can strike and you see it happening even in MMA today. A good Muay Thai elbow strike can knock somebody out. Any strike in the right spot can knock people out, but chances are, you know, like unless they're going Muay Thai versus Muay Thai or strike versus striking, if they're in a clinch scenario and that whole thing, that's probably not.
If you ran the stats, elbows are stopping fights because of blood a great deal more often than actually, like, you know, knocking.
Right. There is a danger aspect to it because remember, although they're allowing north-south, but before, like back of the head, you know, north-south elbows, and there's things they do to protect that. But I would argue, and I have argued this because this is one of those common, like when guys get together, topics around the fights is like, oh,
talking story.
Right. Yeah, talking story. But like I hear this and this irritates me a bit. It's a little bit of a trigger for me, although now that I'm old, I don't have the testosterone to get fully like completely unhinged. But when people say, you know, yeah, the fighter was good back then, but, you know, MMA has evolved. You hear that a lot, especially from young people, especially from people that have never trained. You ever notice that?
Yeah,
and
the armchair quarterback.
They're trying to argue a spreadsheet type of argument of why. And I'm like, dude, if you were to allow headbutts back into MMA right now, the wrestlers that you're ragging on would dominate again.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think you could take the Mark Kerrs of the world,
smashing machine.
Right. The smashing machine types, and allow headbutts back in, and you get to prime that guy back into it, and no stand-ups. You know how now, like, you have 3 seconds to progress. If not, you back up. Get a wrestler with a blast double unstoppable with headbutts. And basically, they'll lay and pray and headbutt their way. They'll headbutt you into living death.
You know what I mean? It's as far as like wanting to know what's functionally effective. You know what I mean?
They'll dominate, and then viewing will drop and onto the next sport. So they have, so it's a blend. But I don't like when people try to say who's the best fighter. Like
they're speaking as if the rules that exist today prove what is the most effective fighting style necessarily, and not taking into the account the fact that there's the entertainment variable that needs to be addressed because it is a business and it needs to be profitable. So
and then you add a weapon into it, whether you know blunt force or sharp edge type.
Wasn't that the favorite question you would hear as an instructor from any beginner that would come into a martial arts class, regardless of the martial arts tradition we're talking about? It's like, well, what happens when you have, 2 guys or 3 guys?
Yeah.
And the practical instructor would always respond the same way. It's like, make sure you have a good pair of Nikes and just run your, you know what I mean?
I'd go ahead and say like, well, if we're talking street,
Yeah.
right, which I think you're talking about at that point,
Right,
because
right.
if you're saying, what if I were at class and all of a sudden I did something that wasn't, liked, and then 3 guys started beating me up. Well, then that's the argument there. That doesn't happen that often,
Right.
although I've seen things happen at practice that could.
No comment.
But if it's street, the reality is it's almost moot
Yeah.
to talk about physical fighting with your hands unarmed. It's almost moot to talk about an edged weapon type of situation, although there is an argument, depending on the distance between you and how many assailants there are, that an edged weapon might be more effective.
This almost becomes a more functional question and conversation to have with like law enforcement
Right.
specialists who are trained. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah,
And even
that's the answer to the test.
Right.
Actually, regardless of what the laws are, and if you can do it legally, it has to be or should be done legally, depending on what your risk tolerance is for jail. But you should always be armed. And the reality is like that is the ultimate form of self-defense is the gun, because there's no
we
jujitsu
skipped
or
ahead straight ahead
karate
to
or
the
tai-
Second Amendment portion of the conversation.
But I mean, the ultimate martial art is gun fu.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
literally, So as you well know, like especially as an aging martial artist, outside of evolving into the more gentle aikidos of the world,
Right.
things that allow me to use less.
Which my father was also a master at.
right. Yeah.
I guess one of my takeaways from early on, and something that I feel like wasn't unique to me, it's not like I evolved this idea on my own or something, but it's something I took from most other people, is finally coming to the realization, because when we were kids, we were brought up in this sort of like, my kung fu is better than yours, and my style can't be stopped, and thinking that there was one unanswerable, like sort of like truth out there that was indefensible. And as you become a practicing martial artist, especially once the mixed martial arts universe began to evolve, and you got to actually see different styles mixing with one another, and then mixing with that, growing up and seeing what the reality of a potential self-defense situation is in the streets. There is no, for sure solution. All you could train for decades in several aspects, like becoming a more evolved self-defense practitioner, but all you're really doing at that point is potentially increasing the odds in your favor slightly. And you just, and the other thing that for sure is, for me, like if I'm getting two people are getting into a fight in the streets, I don't think it necessarily proves who's the better fighter, because one guy could trip over a bar stool and it has nothing to do with their skill set. You know what I mean? And there's so many variables that just, if you really want to find out who is the better combatant, then go into an organized scenario and go into like a padded cage and make sure there's a referee to make sure to fight. If you want to test that,
fighting style, but like.
But my point is, like, in a street fight, you might have better odds to like protect yourself, knowing
There's
what
no
you know,
guarantees.
but it's really like up in the air and anything can happen. And like I said, you could just trip and the night's over.
But the way you opened that was interesting, because you were like, well, there's one martial arts style or one.
Well, we used to
style.
think that when we were kids, right?
Well, the reason for it is black belt theater,
Yeah.
like on Friday nights, and Chinese kung fu movies
Yeah.
affected
Espouse
a
that.
whole generation,
Right.
multiple generations, because if you recall, and I was even affected by that, which leads to like my history, or like where I come from in martial
yeah.
arts, but I was definitely influenced by black belt television and shopping for,
for
ninja
sure.
stars and everything, because one of the most
KC Martial Arts Supply.
right, like because you see in a Chinese kung fu movie, it would be my tiger style is
Right.
kind of challenge the crane, that type of thing, and you
Shaolin versus
that
Wu-Tang.
actually was a culture that was passed. So
Yeah.
then it became like, well, boxing beat this and that whole thing. So it's all
I
media
participated in
generated.
a little bit of that when I was a kid. I mean, I took Taekwondo for like 2 months and Judo for 6 months, and I think I actually got a black belt as a kid in karate and JIKC. Like the sort of the McDonald's version of karate back then. So yeah, I was obsessed with all of that stuff in the
I
beginning.
didn't know you had a black belt in karate.
Hey, does that count though? In JIKC, JIKC is different from like
A black belt is a black belt. Like
I don't know. I never really. I was like a teenager.
how many black belt you got, man?
Yeah, now I'm more. I have more credibility to have this conversation now. Did we ever actually wrap up what the purpose of the podcast was, by the way, and explaining what Talk Story was?
Yeah, well, we went back to what Talk Story was in terms of like it's the way in Hawaii we bridge.
You were actually born and raised in Hawaii, so you probably are more of an authority figure on. Talk Story is an actual pidgin phrase that comes from Hawaiian pidgin English. And it basically means exactly what it says. It's just to sit around and have these informal, long conversations that sort of meander and go where they may. And, it's just a quick catchphrase, right? Like, hey, where you was last night? Like, how come you was at Renton's house till super late? Oh, we was just talking story. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and that pretty much sums it up.
Right.
Yeah, it's a social tool that we use to come together. I think that's what this is.
Does it have any? Hawaiian culture, as I understand it, historically was not a written, did not have a written history, right? It was oral tradition, right? Yeah. So I like to sort of think that we're tying into that sort of like cultural aspect of it too, without trying to like culturally appropriate anything from Hawaii. Because to be clear, I have no Hawaiian blood, as 23andMe recently proved. So.
Well, some of the best things that I've learned and been affected by have come through Talk Story, and it's usually like you'd share an experience or somebody else's experience, like just what we're talking. I'm learning things about it, and then what I think this podcast will do is it'll capture a lot of these very important cultures that die with the person.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's a big deal. So my hope for this is that you bring on a bunch of people, just a bunch of them, that have all their unique stories to share, that we can all benefit from hearing and learning and
officially document.
Perspective. Yeah. There's so many unheard folks that have so much to contribute. And I think this podcast will capture it.
That's a great way to sort of summarize, I guess, part of what I was feeling is like, wow, I'm so lucky to know so many great people that I've come across, over the years and in these different universes that I said I've lived in. It would be great to like get to share their stories with everyone else. That's assuming that we can get more than 7 people to listen to this or watch this, though. So
we'll put another $5.
But if you build it, we'll come.
Right,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, free.
I think if we keep doing this consistently and we keep bringing on quality guests,
show your watch and like this, and we'll give you a coupon for
exactly
off your next.
So we are looking for sponsors, and
but yeah, I think that'd be a great thing. Like to capture those unique individuals that were part of your life, especially like you shared your background. I know you've got skate, you've got mixed martial arts, you've got corporate, like you because of your sponsorships, even when you owned your own brand, so many different people that like I'd be interested just to hear their stories. And
yeah, exactly.
In this day and age of technology, you can actually capture them.
Yeah.
These are very interesting folks. And for those that don't know too, like you were like not necessarily the stunt double, but you were connected at the hip to Paul Walker, and his basically MMA / jiu-jitsu training partner. And I remember when I first was introduced to Paul, it was not through you. It was actually through Fast and Furious 1. And I remember watching him whip out an arm. I'm like,
that's right.
Holy smoke. Wait a minute, jiu-jitsu,
I didn't know that.
It was Lethal Weapon, right?
Right, Mel Gibson.
And from what I understand, Paul insisted that they use jiu-jitsu in Fast and Furious 1, and I always was like a fan from him from then, and I admired it, just this.
Yeah, I didn't actually know that in the beginning that he was already, had the background training with was it Paragon? The school.
It might have been Paragon.
Frangino.
Yeah,
that was the name of the school, right? Paragon.
You would know. I mean, you're the one with the.
Well, I got to meet Frangino. Sure. Yeah.
And so I always had that in the back of my head, and he always had this spot in my head, like he's the guy that's bringing jiu-jitsu into mainstream, into mainstream entertainment. And the next thing I know, I mean, I can't even remember when this happened, but it wasn't that far away from that. Was like, hey man, why don't you come over to the house? Paul's coming over, or something, something like that. Or no, it was like,
see, this is the ongoing debate is wondering how we all became. I know he was already friends with Ron from before because he was training with Ron. That's how me and him became friends, was because he found out that I was also training there, and I had this flexible lifestyle / schedule. I was kind of working as a consultant at the time, and But I feel like I originally met him through the gang, like our mutual friend group that included like Dave Huta, Pat Lou, Ryan Tomashiro, Ron Shiraki, you and
yeah.
So I thought you guys knew him first. I know that this
all a big mystery.
Yeah. Well, it was a blurry time in my life too. That was when we were going out drinking with like Don Lee.
For me, it wasn't. I was pretty clear because and that connection with with Snowbear, that's what we call. Shiraki is he had mentioned, and it actually came through you, was like because was running Connery, Gracie K-Team at the time. Hey, do you mind if I get a spot?
I do remember coming to train. Yeah.
Because what he wanted to do was because Paul had to go to work and like his face was the moneymaker. So can't have some random guy like blasting his eyeball open, like at practice. So,
but he would also jump in and
no, he would know. It's not that he wasn't a gamer. That's the problem, right? So, what I think Snowbear wanted to make sure was that where he went and trained, there were tough, very trained,
good training partners. Yeah,
that knew how to not do accidents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like to make sure that accidents didn't happen. So I think that was my first time meeting with him, was like he came over to train with me. Yeah. And
me and Pat Lou came out.
Yeah. Jimmy Knox, I think.
Yeah, Jay Knox was there.
Yeah. So and it was just a very small group. And funny story about Paul Walker, and you'll laugh. And I think I've shared this with you too. I was like, no Romo, as they say. Let me start with that disclaimer. But man, I remember he walked in and I went, that's a handsome individual.
Well, I feel like my even getting to be friends with him in that universe, it's my exposure to the celebrity world started a long time before that. It was when I was still in the skateboarding universe, because I ended up being the marketing manager for, when we were at our peak, we had like 17 brands or something like that. So being the marketing manager, anytime there was like, this is when skateboarding was starting to snowball a little bit and become sort of not necessarily mainstream popular yet, but it was on its way. The X Games were starting to develop and evolve. And so I would sort of become the representative and the liaison from our company that would be involved in any product placement stuff. So that was my first exposure to sort of Hollywood and that sort of, the entertainment universe. And I hated it because 9 times out of 10, whenever I got invited to some kind of event or something like that, and all the people I had to interact with, it's a stereotype that you become aware of and that you're very familiar with about how fake and plastic everyone in that universe is. And that was my experience. And I was like, ugh, these people are, and coming from Hawaii, I feel like culturally, it's very complete, the polar opposite of that. A couple of things contributed that for me personality-wise was that I just sucked at lying or fronting, so to speak. So what you see is kind of what you get when it comes to me. B, we all grew up on a tiny little rock, so you weren't getting away with shit anyway. So if you combine that with the fact that you're not a good liar, then you're not getting away with nothing. So that universe was kind of gross to me, and it ended up being one of the reasons why we became friends. Me and Paul originally was when I first met him. I think I said something along the lines of like, "Oh, it's refreshing to meet someone from that universe that isn't a giant douchebag like everybody else I ever met." And I think he laughed, and then we found out that our mutual sort of love for jiu-jitsu, and I think we were both like girl dads at the time, younger girls. So those are the bonding points, and that's how we ended up becoming friends. But I was very grateful. I thought he was an incredible human being. I don't want to like try to leverage my friendship with him to, get views for the podcast or anything like that. But yeah, he definitely also played a very big part, I think, in influencing all of us as far as like lead by example, live the way I do kind of a thing. And
I don't want to get us like sobbing here.
Right.
I mean, that's how impactful this guy was. I mean, even in the limited way that, I was exposed, with it to him, like through training and, some social stuff with you all and that type of thing. But just getting to know him, and that was an incredible individual. It changed my life. There's a few folks that outside of the network, like yourself, my really, really close network, but that layer that sits just on the edge of that circle, Paul was one of them.
Yeah.
Like, he made me want to be a better person. Like,
he challenged everyone to be better, I think.
In fact, there's so few of those.
Yeah.
That
There's
you
not
meet
enough.
in life.
Yeah.
There are not enough.
Right.
They're treasures. So like, I think, like when we did lose them, like, and we all did, like, I know for you, it was a really tough time. You went dark for a while, and even for me, I do remember when Ron, actually Snowbear, called me, like, we were sobbing. Like, I mean, it was a really dark moment,
He had a very special relationship with all the people, from that group in Hawaii. And
that's where things started to change a little after Paul.
Yeah, it was, once again, of course, super tragic event, but it brought all of us closer together, I feel like, even after that. And it's sort of like...
It did for a while.
Yeah.
But it also, I think, set some of us, not me per se, but maybe, because I lost myself professionally after that. Like, big time. I went into that, and that was me with the most limited exposure to Paul. Like, you guys were a lot deeper into that. I know, like, even, with Snowbear, like, that one, I could see the trajectory that sent him on, and eventually affected. Maybe it has something to do. I think it's fair to say and reasonable to say that it probably affected my relationship with him as well. But that's as long as we're alive and taking breath, things are always headed in the right direction.
Right. Yeah.
But for you, that absolutely changed things. I've seen a massive change.
That was a tough year because just a few months before that, I had lost my grandmother, who, aside from the group of people, I consider the friend group we have in Hawaii to be sort of like my extended family, and I'm almost tighter with them than I am with a lot of my actual family. But my grandmother was the one person that I was the closest with all of my life.
Yeah.
And she was how I learned what it meant to be loyal or to have honesty and have integrity and all that kind of stuff. She sacrificed her entire life basically just to follow me around and raise me. Unfair, but culturally, she was considered a failure in Japan because she only ever had my mother. She only ever had a daughter. She never had a male-born, heir. So when I was born, even being outcast as I was sort of redemption, just because at least, in her eyes, I was firstborn male in the family. So she sold her house and her business and gave my mom all the money and said, I'm just going to follow you around and help raise Vince since you got to work and, whatever. And also part of the reason why I continue to be able to speak Japanese because she never bothered to learn English. So I got to practice. And anyway, so she raised me and she was the one I spent every day with, my whole life. And now, of course, having led a bit of a separate life as an adult and having lived apart and whatever, but lost her that year. And the last time I actually ever saw Paul was he had come back to Hawaii, and I had already stopped living with him and working with him, and was working in just like the commercial furniture universe at the time. And he calls me up and goes, "Hey, I'm super busy. I want to see everybody, but I don't really have a lot of time. I'm just here for a couple of days doing a commercial. But can you come out to the West Side and have dinner with me? I know your grandma just passed away, so I just want to make sure you're okay." So that was, I feel like I guess speaks to the caliber of person he was. Like, despite being that busy, he still wanted to make sure his friend was okay.
Yeah.
And so to have, yeah. So once again, tragedy that we lost him, but what a great last memory to have him just being that loyal friend.
Yeah, but what you're forgetting to mention was, because it's funny, like if I recall, because you had a job and you were like really trying to make a go of it, and then you'd be like, "Oh man, Paul just called me, said he wants me to go with him for 3 months."
Yeah,
on set to blah blah blah. Because that's what, like, I don't think we've explained that on this podcast, but for a while, if I recall, you would literally go and like it was part of his contract.
Exactly how long
movie contracts.
So I was
you, I think
I was working freelance, and when they. At the time, and he called me up. This is when we had been friends for several years and training whenever he was in town, kind of a thing. And he called me up and said, "Hey, I know you're working freelance. Don't take any more gigs right now. I've convinced, or basically, I've insisted that Universal write you in as my jiu-jitsu instructor while we filmed Fast and the Furious 5, which was, I think, 3 months in Puerto Rico and 3 months in Atlanta." Yeah, it was Fast 5. And I originally, once again, I had a great friendship with him. Well, we all did. But I had no desire to have anything to do with that universe because I hated it from, And I was like, I don't want to, I'm not your instructor, first of all. I'm barely like a decent training partner. Shiraki out here is your instructor. So only with his blessing, first of all. But second, I don't really have any desire to live in that universe with you. If you're some kind of a diva in that universe, then I'm probably going to be the first one to, think that that's lame or something or whatever it is. And he's like, no. And I was very sort of like lacked any ability to be spontaneous and very routine driven, sort of like OCD-ish.
Weird.
Yeah.
It's not you.
But
yeah, it is.
The reason why I accepted was he sort of like threw the gauntlet out there once again, challenging you to be a better person. I was like, I'm gonna teach you how to live with the rug pulled out from underneath you, because he was very, his nickname was the Vagrant, and he could just like drop everything and at the on a dime and go somewhere else for 6 months with nothing, maybe like a backpack and a change of clothes or something. He was very spontaneous and great in that sense. So I thought it was a good challenge, and that's. But it was supposed to be for just that one movie, and it ended up being, I think it was like a couple of years all in or something like that, but
the
yeah,
jiu-jitsu was the bond.
He was legit. He was a tough role.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like, and I remember I think he was either a white or a blue belt at the time when I rolled with him. I rolled with him gi, and it was hilarious because I remember like Snowboard said, don't go too crazy.
Right.
Back then I was a little bit of, a little.
I have the bruises to prove it.
Yeah. And so I was like, all right, I'll take it easy. So I pass them, and then I mount them, and here we go again. No Romo, right? So I'm like, okay, boop, boop, boop. I get mount, and I put my hand in for a deep collar for potentially a cross stroke. And I remember him looking up at me, and I went, those are the bluest eyes I've ever seen on an individual. Did I ever tell you like how handsome you are?
Better keep throwing that no Romo disclaimer out there.
Even choking the guy was handsome. You know what I mean? But incredible spirit, like
very athletic,
super athletic. Yeah. I mean, physically super strong.
Yeah.
Like
he was a superior athlete to me, for sure.
And strong. But also no ego, because like usually when he gets choked and when people get manhandled like that, they tend to knee-jerk reaction. They come back angry. They're like with him, it was just he was having a blast
because of my relationship with Higan Machado, one of the godfathers of jiu-jitsu, and I was very lucky to have befriended him at the beginning of my jiu-jitsu career.
Hopefully we see him on this.
I would very much like to get him on here. Yeah. So Higan, if you're out there, if you spent the 7 minutes to watch this, then I hope you will agree to be our guest on a very upcoming episode, hopefully. But because of my relationship with him, I've been lucky enough to, I always joke and say I'm the spoiled brat in the jiu-jitsu universe because he was one of my best friends. Like I got to meet all these world champions and because of his sort of obsession and love for being involved in the entertainment industry, he has far less problems with it than I do from an emotional perspective. So I've gotten to meet some other celebrities and train with a couple of different ones. I won't name names or anything like that, but yeah, Paul was by far the most athletic of and he wasn't one of Higan's guys, but although they knew each other from before as well. But yeah, Paul was the only legit, I feel like, athlete, person of athletic caliber in that universe that I've ever encountered. Everyone else, I was much more like kid gloves and had to make sure that I didn't like bruise their fragile egos or, that kind of a thing.
I mean, we see it now, like even through Higan's extended, student network, because I think his thing is he trains a lot of celebrities.
Yeah, that's his.
But I think it was Tom Hardy. He's one of Higan's guys, right?
I don't know if it's one of his guys, but I know that they've done private, at least a private together, if not multiple.
Well, one
privates.
Private from Higan is potentially jiu-jitsu
very valuable thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean that's
when we brought him out to do that seminar in Hawaii. It changed a lot of people's games.
Changed my game.
I remember you were saying that
completely.
Yeah.
Like, and I'd always told you that because I never really got to thank Higan until eventually, I got to know him out here and a lot better. But his approach to jiu-jitsu and the way he teaches it and explains things, if you're really looking at the deep level of it, it's actually groundbreaking and incredible.
Yeah.
And like I'll tell you just what he taught me that one time he introduced me in Hawaii. And there were a few top level guys there, because remember I think Egan was even there. It was like TJ, Egan, Rylan was there. Yeah, if I believe Eric Kiahi, there were people. Did he even come to that one? Anyway, long story.
That was that big seminar that TJ put on, and it was Rob Kamen and Rico Ciparelli and
right, but
Matt
there's very few. Like it felt like a private.
It was I don't know. I thought it was a pretty big turnout, but
was it? Maybe I was so
for the caliber of instruction that was there. It should have been 10 times bigger.
Right.
It should have basically been the entire population of Hawaii.
Right.
But I still thought it was like I was pretty happy with how many people did turn out. It was hard to get people to show up for seminars in Hawaii.
Oh, back then,
because Hawaii in general was the spoiled brat of the jiu-jitsu universe, because world champions would come through all the time.
To make money in jiu-jitsu in Hawaii because they're always like I can always get it from my cousin who's and they're right actually.
Yeah.
Probably,
right.
Those type of things. But I remember that that particular seminar, and actually Rylan was my training partner.
Okay.
Yeah, so I believe we were there. By the way,
this was like the sort of the tractor philosophy of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, by the way, Rylan is Max Holloway's.
Rylan was
so nepotistic, right?
Right, yeah.
So such a small network. But back to it, I remember doing the move. It was Higan's stack, like his stack pass, and although it was a particular move where he clears it and does all of these things, my takeaway when I learned it was he's changing the sphere that we're playing on. So rather than just playing on this flat sphere, he's actually changing it, and now we're changing angles to our advantage because these are things that we can take control of. My jiu-jitsu level went from this to this like almost overnight,
just with that,
and then it changed because back then too I was fighting, right? So like it was like that changed even how I looked at ground and pound. I'd even say that completely changed the way I started to do jiu-jitsu. Like because I never looked at it from an angle of the type of MMA violence that I thought, that I eventually it eventually became. I looked at it more from a move for move. So I was still from the mindset of, I'm learning these different passes. I'm learning this system. Here's what you do. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. After Higan, it turned into more of a philosophy. Like, here's what I want to do. Using Higan's style of changing the sphere, put myself in a superior position that I can head stomp a guy and pull the life out of him. When I went into that mode, it changed everything. Like, all my passing, all the passes I discarded, although I kept them because in specific sport times you need to use certain ones. But in general, it became more it eventually evolved into what we call the Kuma ride that I made for my body, right? Because I'm more like stocky and whatever.
Once again, I've been the victim of that as
it's
well.
An evolution or a byproduct of Higan's initial lesson to me.
I never tied it back to that. That's interesting.
It was,
but it makes sense. It totally makes sense that it does.
Totally tied to that. The angles, the stacking, all of that stuff. And then it's funny because it really took advantage of the spheres, and not to take away any credit, but jump to the future. The last 5 to 10 years, Gordon Ryan, I think it was in the last 5 years, came out to Hawaii and did seminars in a bunch of my old schools. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And it's funny because all of the guys were telling me that, and I've seen it now because he has videos out that show this, that the pass series that he likes to use, that pressure, the way he does it.
Pressure passing is like body lock?
It's very much, he does a like stack hip.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there's a bunch of stuff he does that just overlap what he.
Was it Higan-esque?
Yeah. It's not just Higan-esque, it's basically the exact same principles being used. And then stuff that I was doing even with Kuma Ride, which is in there. So what I'm saying is, no, it's not like he took what we had and then copied it. He actually came up with this on his own, but it reinforces.
Right.
So whenever I see things, like somebody using it, it's not like, oh, he stole this.
You know, if it's something that Gordon Ryan's promoting, it's going to be probably among the most elite, functionally effective.
Like any concerns I have, because I'm not even.
And here are some principles that go back 20 years.
So when you see somebody at that level do exactly what you were doing, you're like, oh, that, like, it validates.
Yeah, I feel like I'm almost not capable of appreciating the level of technical, I guess, ability that the best in jiu-jitsu has to offer. I always say, I'm grateful. I love jiu-jitsu. The thing that I love the most about it, I think, is the cerebral component, and how completely polar opposite to what we were talking about earlier, jiu-jitsu espouses that there is no 100% move, you know what I mean? Like a for sure move. There's always a if this, then that sort of scenario for everything in jiu-jitsu. And that, to me, is the funnest part of it, like the puzzle. And it is like human chess, you know what I mean? You're trying to figure out, if you do this, he's probably going to do that, then you're going to do this, then that. It's just like you're trying to think moves ahead, right? And that kind of a thing. But at that level, like I still feel like, and I'm grateful to be a part of that universe and to have been treated so well in it, but I just feel like I'm not even capable of wrapping my head around some of those, like, the sort of the intellectual, I guess, variables that go into making some of those systems so effective, you know what I mean? Like the pressure passing system and all that stuff. I have memorized some of the moves, you know what I mean, and know how to do some of it. I
do it last Saturday on our friend Ian. I was like, I don't forget. Shout out to Ian. I think Ian went a little too hard, and then I went, oh, look, he's getting stacked, and there comes the hip pressure. You pressure passed him into like a living death type knee to the belly.
I didn't say I don't know how to do all of it. I know how to do some of it, but I want to continue to evolve my jiu-jitsu so that I'm able to participate in an intellectual conversation about the theory behind it and why things work, and hopefully to evolve some of those techniques. Not to say that I want to take it further than what Higan's done or anything like that, but just to understand it and to help fit it into people's games. You know what I mean?
I don't even know if it's about a further thing as much as it is to just a longevity thing. Like, and everyone's physically a little different, mentally, emotionally a little different. So that's the whole point. Like, we're doing a new thing right now that
I was going to say, great opportunity, great segue to transition to potentially the next topic of conversation, Makule Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah. So it's Makule Jiu-Jitsu, right? And how did we even perfectly segue into this? And
I know.
I think it's because we're talking about getting older, about experiences shaping us and whatnot. And that's the whole point of Makule Jiu-Jitsu. Makule itself, that Hawaiian word, for those that don't know,
for the 7 listeners,
refers to like an older person or an old timer, essentially. And in Hawaii, it's kind of used in a little funny way because if you recall, and it's still around, like you hear Makule League. Whenever that's basically the retirement league for a lot of times it's baseball players, but it's evolved into different other sports. Maybe it's surfing, maybe there's, different types of things. But we're like, hey, there's nothing for particularly jujitsu. And how that came about was my younger brother, he's like 11 years younger than me. I'm like, hey, Matt, there's no reason why you should be not doing jujitsu. You've done it like with me, since you were young. You've trained with me. Let's get you back in. Like, here's a gi. Let's go train. He's like, Mark. He's like, if there was a Makule League, I'd come back. He told me that
So Matt's 11 years younger, and he's claiming Makule.
Yeah.
So that means hang on, carry the one.
I'm older than you.
Not by much, though, right?
Yeah, not by much, but enough to say that 11 years younger. Yeah. Matt is still
for him to still be claiming.
Yeah, I'm in the 5-0 club. You know
so
what I mean?
Am I. Yeah, I'm halfway through the 5th floor. I'm gonna be 55 in a couple months.
Halfway point. But nothing that just for men can't take care of. But anyway, so like as far as the Makule League goes, so when my brother said that, actually not just hit a nerve, but I was like, eureka. It's one of those moments I'm like, this is actually what's absolutely needed because, as you know, jiu-jitsu pretty much got its start, Brazilian jiu-jitsu in the Helsinki way, like early 90s. And so you got Gen 1, you got Gen 2, Gen 3. And when you look at that, they're all hitting Makule. Up to Gen 2, Gen 3 already are hitting Makule age. And when you look at how many people have quit, I mean, just in general, you don't even have to say jiu-jitsu, just martial arts in general, people hit a certain age and they quit. And the reason is because there's nothing for us to evolve into that does three things, right? Let's say one thing for sure. One is protect us and allow us to still do it without getting hurt. So essentially, as we hone this in, and Makule Jiu-Jitsu, the brand and the movement, is going to capture all of this. And that's why it's kind of a really big deal. Just
to clarify real quick, when you say without getting hurt, the opportunity to get hurt, you think comes from the hard sparring that still happens in almost every school.
Well, it's hard to just blanket statement hard sparring because I think an older person can hard spar, but there has to be certain parameters around it and a way to do it that prevents injury. So what I was going to say was that like the focus of Makule Jiu-Jitsu, the movement or the brand, one of the things that it represents is the aging athlete and providing structure and a method and a way and a philosophy of the first thing when it comes to physicality and martial arts, protecting and keeping in mind things like muscle elasticity and then tendon and ligament strength. Those are the three things or the two things right there that if you don't put them on the top priority and keep that in mind while you're doing things and shaping everything around that, one of those things is going to blow out on you, regardless of mind over matter, regardless of your diet and all these different things. If you don't focus that and put that as your number one parameters, you're going to end. And then all it takes is one severe injury on one of those things. Even if it only takes you out for 6 months, at this age, 6 months already, your body starts falling apart and then it's hard to even get back into it. So as a top priority, training and physicality and all these exercises and sparring will be based around those things as the focus, protecting those three things. And then with that said, then what are other things we can do to potentially enhance those things? Flexibility of them, strength of them, and whatnot. And then it goes into the things that also tie into helping you grow older, healthier, which is diet and rest, right? So, and really there's not, like I've asked so many different, even older fighters, hey, do you have anything for the aging athlete? And most of them, the answer is just stop doing it. And it really is that. And I don't want to have that happen. And, I won't say what my age is, but I'm well into the 5-0 club right now. And I'm still practicing, not quite as hard. I'm very selective of my partners.
Yeah,
the same way like Paul, like back to the Paul thing that you had to be because he had to protect a certain thing. Whereas aging athletes, now we have to protect.
We've all got to protect something.
Right. So if we know that, then we have to select our partners correctly. We have to rest correctly. We have to prioritize those three things, muscle elasticity and then ligament and tendon strength, and then diet, right? Because those things can affect it, what does that lead into? Diet. The big deal as an aging athlete is inflammation in your body, which ties to primarily, if you're into this nutrition movement. By the way, that's another topic for maybe not this podcast, but
I'm definitely
nutrition renaissance, right? In the last 10 to 15 years, it's like the space age for it right now.
I've been studying it for decades, and it's just hard to keep track of what
the advancements now, right?
The advancements, but even like something that was demonized 15 minutes ago is now the healthiest thing you can do. You know what I mean? Like we all grew up being told eggs were going to kill us or whatever it is, and now it's like the healthiest form of protein, and it doesn't impact cholesterol the way it does. So I hope that we can get people on this podcast that can speak to both sides of that argument. You know what I mean? And present facts and their points of view, and let the listener decide for themselves like what they believe the truth to be. But yeah, I think that's an ever evolving thing, and it seems to be exponentially evolving.
Though with that said, I think the evolving or the places where that tends to be, goes back and forth or fluid, it isn't the base layer of it. So what I'm getting at is like if we keep in mind like muscle elasticity, tendon and ligament strength, and then of course inflammation. No one can argue those things. It's not like, well, sometimes it's that, sometimes it's not that. It's always that. Like in the human body, it's always that.
Right.
The argument comes from what is it exactly that we're doing that affects that,
and how can we mitigate it? Yeah.
Right. So that's where the discussion happens. But if we all agree that the goal is to have less inflammation,
for sure, yeah.
Right. And then what is the cause of it? And I think even in modern medicine now, even Western, right, which wasn't always the case, and even pharmaceuticals are being forced to come to this, is basically insulin resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Because blood measurements, and we can thank folks like, Peter, Dr. Attia, and that, if you get look way down into that rabbit hole.
I'm getting I'm getting into all of that right now. I just did functional health, like, blood testing, 150 markers or whatever it is.
Right.
That's
lipid panels, like glucose levels.
Peter Attia's stuff, Rhonda,
But all those things deal with, like basically mitigating negative things that happen when you become insulin resistant, which is tied directly, causality type of thing, to inflammation, which is the root of all evil in your body.
Right.
In fact, like I'll tell folks this too, and I'm just a simple backseat or armchair quarterback when it comes to nutrition and whatnot, but think about what they throw at you when all other medications fail, right? It's prednisone.
Okay.
That's like, I don't quite know what's wrong with you, but we're going to put you on a cycle of prednisone, which is basically steroids.
Right.
What do steroids do to fight inflammation? Right. So that's always it. And so, but I'd be interested to hear that too on this podcast.
I would love to be able to get experts from all the different sides of the nutrition conversation. I mean, you and I are perfect examples of this. You've always kind of been more of a sort of like a keto, heavy influence when it comes to the way you eat. For a long time, I espoused believing that the plant-based diet was the healthiest way to go, and I would eat like 80% carb. I never followed it strictly 100%. I would always like cheat on the weekends and eat meat or eat whatever I want, basically. But I was far more of the opinion that I thought that was the that was the better way to eat, and it was the healthier way to eat, and addressed inflammation better. But now I'm not sure, because now I've tried to open my mind up to trying to study the arguments on the other side of that coin. I've been doing animal protein for a good several months now.
Right.
I'm probably in better shape than I have been.
Dude, you look phenomenal. I was gonna say, I'm like, that's not a plant-based body, bro.
No, this is for the first time.
Too much muscle, too much strength.
In the last 6 months, for the first time in my life, I've actually followed the sort of the workout guidelines for protein, like a gram per pound kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So I've been eating more protein than I ever have. I was under the assumption, based on what I've been taught from the whole food plant-based universe, that I was going to have it negatively impact the way I feel in certain ways. I have not thus far experienced that. So and on the carnivore diet, but on the carnivore diet side of things, one of the things that caught my attention was they make the argument that, well, so much of the so-called evidence that the whole food plant-based community espouses comes from, what do they call it, epidemiological studies, which is basically just like observational data, I guess. Is that, and I would like to have experts come on to explain even that to me, because I think part of the reason why I'm so interested in wanting to have these conversations is I want to come at, I have a lot of questions from the layperson's perspective, from the dummy's perspective, from the person that doesn't have a degree in nutrition, essentially. So I've got a lot of questions, and if it is just epidemiological data that, everywhere where they have these kinds of light bulbs in the street lights, they have lower fat, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't necessarily, it's correlation isn't causation or whatever it is, that kind of thing. So where are the people that have actually studied the sort of the science behind it? Like, when you eat this, it does this in your body and causes this to happen. And I'm also, I think, being the perpetual student and a lifelong learner, I'm never convinced that something is going to be 100% true forever. That's just sort of the skeptic in me as well. Like, always sort of doubting and wondering if there's a more to it kind of a thing as far as the education and the information goes. I think nutrition is going to be a topic that contributes to that forever. I don't think we're ever going to know for sure. But I am interested in having people on that contribute to those conversations.
I slightly disagree with that. I think, like, when it comes to nutrition, it's not one of those things that's going to continually waffle through time until time ends.
You think there's going to be an absolute truth?
Yeah, because I think the way we develop...
That would be great.
Yeah, especially the way science is going right now, there are certain inarguable, like, things, like, in this world. Like, when we're talking... I mean, of course... You could go quantum and temporal and stuff where, like, you can deconstruct anything if you go that far, but the chances of that are like, I don't even think there's a number that can potentially measure the fraction of how the likelihood of some of those things. But what I'm trying to get at is, when you start looking at lipid panels and blood, and they are now, like, where things were before potentially correlated, but due to studies now, they're actually causal, like directly related. I'll give you an example, like small particle LDL cholesterol. Like, the argument would be,
that's a lot of what Peter Attia talks about, right? Is the smaller, like, more dense lipoprotein A,
exactly, or ApoB, for example.
Yeah,
right. So small particle and like ApoB, where they were like, you hear a lot of bad arguments, right? Like, a lot of misrepresentations where, like, you have really high, because especially at our age, the argument right now, one of the big things is statins, right? And the negative effects of statins and that whole thing. And so then it gets you partially, like, to step into the rabbit hole a little bit. And then people will argue about, well, what's your LDL cholesterol? And then a person that doesn't want you to focus on that and whatever will just tell you, well, it has nothing to do with it, because if you're carnivore based, of course you're going to have a high LDL because of the fat transporting and blah, 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 that whole thing. But then that's not perfectly accurate as well, because if you have high LDL cholesterol, it's just something that's not directly related to heart disease directly. It's correlated, but then when you drill down on that, so then of the LDL, and you get tested for ApoB, which is, a little thing that hangs out on your red blood cell, which blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and... So
this hits home personally for me, because I have always been very leery and skeptical of sort of the health industry, especially in America. I'm also very averse to, like, big pharma, and I'm afraid to take Tylenol and Advil. I try to stay away from medication altogether.
Yeah.
But most of my life, though, I've been told that I'm healthy, right? Like, but one of the things that you always hear from the skeptic's perspective is that they don't test for enough in the standard, like, annual physical and blood tests that you go get. They test for like 6 markers or something like this. I'm being hyperbolic, and it's more than that. No,
it's totally
it's true. Insufficient, right?
Right.
And I know that to be true now at this point, because all my life that's what I did. This year, for the first time, I decided to go get the function health testing results. I thought I was going to pass out because they took like 20 fucking buckets of blood out of my arm. But get, the testing, like, whatever it is, 150 markers or something, and it comes back. And yeah, I actually am in the sort of above the healthy range for a lot of those markers, for ApoB, for lipoprotein A, and all that kind of stuff. So now I'm, like, seeking out medical expertise to see what I can do from a lifestyle perspective, or whatever it is. But point being, like,
and you're animal based.
Well, I am now. So is it because I'm animal based that my health markers are bad?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, did you say your health markers were bad?
the cardiac stuff is above range for a lot of the stuff. I mean, I could pull up the results and go through.
It'd be interesting. Well, I mean, we could talk about.
Yeah, we can talk about it after, because these people aren't interested in seeing that part of it. But yeah, so all my life been told I'm healthy, cholesterol's like super low, in range, whatever it is, and then I test for the things that they don't test for in the standard annual visit to your doctor and physical checkup thing, and I do the 150 markers thing, and it suggests that there are a lot of cardiac markers that are sort of high and out of range. So. I'm also trying to learn how to use AI and all that kind of stuff. So feeding it through the LLMs, and I'm not panicking. It suggests that because I have this sort of overcompensation on the other side of things as far as being healthy and in all the other areas of my life, I probably don't have like heart disease per se right now, and I'm not in dire need of medical attention, but definitely.
Have you taken a calcification arterial?
I just did that this past week on Tuesday.
Did they give you a result yet?
I think it takes like 3 to 5 business days. Yeah.
That's the next step.
Yeah, so I'm waiting for that result and then taking it all to a specialist that deals in preventative medicine and sort of like long-term, like, you know what I mean? Like, not just like a surgeon. I don't want to just like get a prescription and or go under the knife. I want to discuss lifestyle changes that are going to make me, once again, my primary focus always having been health and longevity versus it's not for aesthetics or anything like that.
Well, health and longevity. So that's like circles back to Makula Jiu-Jitsu.
Exactly.
So
which is what
Makula Jiu-Jitsu is that's it. So our goal, and it's going to be provided via YouTube and our our webpage, and of course the different social media outlets, but it's just to provide that, like training type regimens, exercises that an aging athlete can do, rest recommendations, and then of course nutrition. And which side of the coin I tend to fall on that, because I found through just my constant OCD down that nutritional rabbit hole that tends to produce, from what I can see, the best results, especially when it comes to lipid panels and those type of markers. When you look at it, primarily helping with inflammation, which is the athlete's number one worst enemy, right? So, but Makula Jiu-Jitsu will be all of those things, and thanks to my partner John Brada, that's how I met him. He was like the vice president of marketing when we were working on the Monster Energy brewing side with their water that they were doing. And, he had listed on his resume, Jiu-Jitsu, or something like that. I was like, what kind of vice president lists Jiu-Jitsu on there?
So he was at Monster. That's where you guys were at? Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've been with Monster for how long now?
I'm on my 18th year with the corporation.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Although, who knows? It might be time to retire soon, because it does come with a bit.
Well,
of
if Makula Jiu-Jitsu and Talk Story takes up,
yeah, right. Not before I get an M claw on it, like officially. But but through John actually came up with a logo and a design.
I saw.
When I was talking about Makula Jiu-Jitsu, I was just talking about it as a concept to where, like online.
Oh, really? Was it just sort of like a brainstorming conversation originally, and he just kind of ran with it? And
well, I was just telling him about like
it?
Makula Jiu-Jitsu and like how I was going to get some of my older friends involved with it. And that way we'd have a little league and have fun with this. And he goes, why don't I put a logo and a design and, that whole thing. And he came up with one that you saw, really kind of funny.
It's pretty cool.
He came up with the slogan. I think it was like old, slow, but still dangerous. That.
By the way, how incredible is it that you can produce something like that? And I'm not saying it's like 6 months worth of graphic design work that we would have invested in it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But just to be able to do that without even having to get a graphic designer nowadays with the technology that's available.
Yeah, so AI is replacing quite a few things. Although, like, let's use his name again. Like, my number one strongest marketing guy I know is Hans.
Right.
Like him or hate him, that guy is an incredible marketer.
I've gotten the chance to. I don't really know him that well. I've met him several times, like just like introductions kind of a thing. Always super cool to me. But his background was he was Triumph before though, right?
Oh, before that he was skate. He was with Osiris.
Yeah. I remember. Prior to that, I rember his name.
He was a sponsored
from our universe.
Surf,
right.
Whole thing, yeah.
But he was also Triumph United, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He was. And then it still is him, in fact.
Okay, and is like at the Monster universe.
Okay, so how is Hans? Well, you got to have him on.
I would love to have him on. Yeah,
maybe it's even a phone call where he's be like, "I'm not shutting up on your phone calls," but he'll answer your call. You like
that's all I'm gonna get out of him.
But I'll give you this, because I don't want to like give too much away for a podcast that may potentially happen with it. But Hans is in a contract status, although he rocks a Monster Energy email and whatnot, and he is the lead of our combat sports department. but he is in a contractor mode, and
Is
the
it
reason
1099?
for it,
Basically, independent contractor.
yeah,
Like not
and
not a
yeah.
W-2 salary. Like
and the reason
gotcha.
for that is because he has so many other brands and things that he owns and has his hands in.
he's got like a knife company too, right? Like I've seen.
He's got an incredible knife.
Looks
company. It's called
beautiful, yeah.
Crimson Knife Company, and hopefully I get a free bloody
Product
knuckles out of that.
promotion.
Yeah, like bottle opener knuckles for that. But yeah, but like I said, I don't want to stay on that too long. But
Okay.
yes, he's in that status because of the multiple things he has his hands in. But what I was gonna say was
sorry.
what his comment was on our logo for Makule was.
Yeah, what did he say?
He was like, yeah. It's cute, but I can tell it's AI, and you actually need to, like, if you want to be legit, you need to have a real artist do a rendition for you. It can be even based off of that, but it's got
I've got several that I have
including a
access to,
font.
yes.
Yep, yeah, you do. Yeah. So, and that's great advice. So we're at that point, but where we're going to reach out for that. But the logo already has been registered. The name, I mean, we paid for it. Like it's a big thing.
USPTO.gov, huh?
And as you know, we even exactly. And last week we shot our first footage for it for the landing page, and I'm excited. I think the most exciting thing is it'll be very valuable to the aging athlete as a resource and as an identity, because right now, even me, I don't have an identity. I wear funny shirts, I wear Snoopy and stuff like that, because even though back maybe 20 years ago, I'd love to wear a Fight Company shirt because I could rock that.
I could never get into that. That's why I started Rays back then. Is because I didn't want to wear some shirt that
I wore Rays gear because it was a Fight Company shirt. And,
but it didn't blatantly say, well, aside from BJ's favorite shirt that said Fight Junkie, nothing else really said like I'm a fighter, right? Like,
well, Ruka did because of BJ for a while.
I think Ruka blew up because of BJ. I mean,
but
they existed before his involvement in the UFC and all that stuff, but they were always sort of a medium-sized like surf skate brand. But it was really BJ wearing it into the UFC over and over again that blew it up in that. Just even that they became bigger in surf and skate because of that too.
Of course.
Yeah, BJ. I give full credit to being the one that sort of like really blew them up.
You could call it surf and skate, but in Hawaii after BJ Penn, if you saw Ruka shirt, the guy was a fighter. He wasn't a surfer or a skater.
Right. Yeah. It became identified with that, yeah.
But point is, I'll give you another example. Yeah. I don't wear the Monster M Claw, rarely on anything that looks printed or looks athlete, because I don't want to do the brand a disservice. Because I know what I
remember we were having that conversation. You were telling me that, like, we're too old to be wearing, whatever is this cool brand or that cool brand. I'm still wearing all of that right now.
No, right. So, but the point is like a 50-year-old guy dressing like a 14-year-old skater. At some point, you need to hang it up, even though people think it's a look.
I don't know how to dress any other way.
Well, exactly. So here we are having this discussion.
This is you giving me my out.
Right. Well,
I can wear Makule now and not look like an idiot when I go to the bar.
Potentially, not necessarily Makule, but maybe. Right. So, what do we have to roll into right now? Dockers, khakis, and a golf polo shirt?
Yeah, I'm not doing that shit either.
No, right? So there's really only one other look that I think that older gentlemen that are athletes can roll into and look semi-cool. One is tactical, but then again, you're like, if you're not actually a tactical guy trying to roll into tactical, or you have no LEO or, like military.
Then you're a poser.
You're kind of a poser, but the look works.
Yeah,
I mean, if you look at it, that flannel with the combat boots and the hat, the dad cap, thing there, I'm like, that's kind of a cool look. But I mean, you might not show up at a nice dinner or like certain things. So, or even casually, like there's a point where maybe it's a little too much. But do we have anything that still represents us, like the fight world and whatever that we can roll into? There is no brand that stands there right now that actually captures that specifically.
Right.
I think Makule will fulfill that because it's somewhat self-deprecating. It's fun. That's what John likes to say. It's fun. As we become old, that's what dad jokes are all about. If there was a brand that would be a dad joke, it'd be Makule Jiu-Jitsu. Because Makule Jiu-Jitsu itself, the name, is a dad joke.
Right.
It's like Makule League, the old timers league, but it's still cool. Like that's the point of saying like, old, slow, but still dangerous. Maybe.
So how do you see this evolving, I guess, as a company or a product? Is it, I'm sure you'll have merch to sell to sort of support it financially.
Well, we've got rash guards right now, but it'll have for sure t-shirt.
A line at some point, right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like you want it to be more than just a clothing brand. Like you want it to be, I guess, like a resource or a community or...
Yeah, the mission.
The mission,
is to provide an identity and a path. Like, nutritional training,
and to provide guidance in that universe.
Yes, so that older athletes know that they can still continue on with an identity without feeling like a poser, without that whole thing. Give us something to roll into that feels good and is fun and something that's still appealing to us. Because right now there's no appeal, even for me. One of my good friends, Barrett Yoshida, by the
Legend.
way, ADCC.
Would love to have him on. Yeah.
He's just entered the 5-0 club and still competing at the
he is he's someone
competing in the regular division, not even the Makule division.
Yeah,
he's winning.
He is to me one of the most remarkable people from the jiu-jitsu universe, because that universe, I feel like there was such a, I guess, people were always protecting their reputations, right? Growing up in the generation that I grew up in the jiu-jitsu universe, they would work their asses off to get these accomplishments
8 hours
in the competitive universe,
practice,
become world champions or whatever it is, but then like not want to risk potentially losing that moniker, right? Like want to protect that reputation, not necessarily undefeated or anything like that, but I'm a couple times world champion or whatever it is. Barrett, I feel like, is the complete polar opposite and never cared about like protecting his reputation. Like, oh, that guy beat him, kind of a thing. He didn't care. Like he would compete with anyone, like always. And he got more active the older he got, I feel like.
Yeah, no, actually,
he just keeps getting busier and busier.
If there's one person that, like, how I said there's very few people like a Paul and stuff, Barrett actually is that in my life.
Yeah,
he's actually an inspiration to me and to a lot of different people, but I have had the privilege and honor of having him as like a personal friend and even a jiu-jitsu mentor / instructor / person that's constantly inviting me, not forcing me, but he's always like, hey man, practice, blah, 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 blah. Why don't you compete? That whole thing. He makes me, when I feel like quitting, not quit. And he may not know this yet, but he's one of our target guys for
Absolutely.
Jiu-Jitsu. He represents the whole, like what I'm capturing with this is what Barrett's actually doing.
That, right? Yeah. He's living it.
If you look at what Barrett does, like, so,
have you, because you know him better than a lot of us, have you noticed the evolution of his sort of like the way he approaches it? Like as far as like nutrition, recovery, and training and all that kind of stuff? Yeah,
for sure. Like, Barrett's whole thing, and this is a guy that teaches 23 classes a week still.
Wow, and 23 classes a week? Jesus.
It's insane. The guy's Superman, although he's going to, hey, Barrett, if you're listening, you need to scale that back a little and rest a little bit more, because I want
a little bit more on the recovery side. Yeah.
He'll probably outlive us all, though.
Burning the candle at all 13
For sure. His nutrition, I'm not perfectly sure what it is, but I do know that he is adhering to something.
Right.
I do know he eats meat because sometimes I share with him poke and that kind of stuff like that. Don't know if it's animal based or not, but I do know from a training perspective, he's always keeping in mind those 3 things that I'm talking about.
Interesting.
And he does alternative types of sports and exercises to keep those muscles strong. So it's not just roll all day long. And then
I feel like I've seen him post. I used to.
He hits baseballs.
Right. And doesn't he do like some balance board stuff too?
He hits baseballs. He rides balance boards. He rides those, that single wheel roller skate thing?
Yeah. That's what it was.
He'll roll that around. He does nunchucks. Like he'll
really?
Nunchucks. He does butterfly knives for his small motor neurons. Everything he does, you think this guy just likes to do and master a whole bunch of different things. No, he does it all for jiu-jitsu. So he is actually Makule jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I guess he's the living personification.
He is the living personification of it. And if you look, they say, and it's biblical too, right? Like you just look at the fruits of the tree.
Right.
And when you look at Barrett's fruits, everything he produces is formidable and good people.
Yeah. He's really great people. He's all, he's I once again don't know him anywhere near as well as you do, but have been lucky enough to have many interactions with him, mutual friends. I would love to get him here. If you can make that happen, let's do that. But from, and I first met him decades ago at this point, and one of the humblest people I've ever met, always just very happy-go-lucky, easygoing, and for being one of the more dangerous people that I've ever seen compete for as long as he's been competing now. Like, you would never be able to tell that from talking to him, I feel like, other than like looking at his ears maybe or something. But
for sure. He's going to be such an interesting interviewer. Like just an interesting talk story.
Well, so great sort of poster child for Makule Jiu-Jitsu. So you want to build this community around it, and make it a resource for the aging athlete, and it'll include...
And for yourself.
Well, I mean, we are the aging athletes, right? For as much as I hate to admit it, I buck that. I feel like maybe that's my insecurity, but I have like I don't care. Age is just a number. I'm still doing what the young bucks do, and I'm still rolling with them or whatever it is. Yeah, whatever. I'm full of shit. It hurts. But so Makule Jiu Jitsu will have it'll be a resource. You'll be able to get you see drill how to exercise, in the jiu-jitsu universe, drills, actual techniques and instructionals, and probably what resources to also include like how to eat and how to recover.
Friendly drills.
Right, Makule friendly drills, right. Geared towards
the aging
preventing injury and unnecessarily and that kind of thing. Well, it sounds like a very promising, I think it has a ton of potential and it's a great opportunity. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it evolves.
I'd love to see it grow, but even if it doesn't grow at this point in time, it's just part of like what I'll do just for my friends.
Yeah, it's something that we're going to do anyway, right? Like it's how we have to like live our lives anyway.
Why not give it a name
share,
and actually, try to organize it a little bit?
It's nice that it doesn't have to like, oh, I'm putting all my eggs in this basket, and if this doesn't work as a business, then like, then it dies on the vine. No, it's just something you're going to do anyway.
Well, even the business aspect to it, it just is. It is a business. I mean, when you get guys like even yourself, who's part of it, like me, John, we're talking literally combined experience, like over 100 years of experience in marketing and business
just
and
painful
whatnot.
to admit, but
even if we call it fun,
right,
which it is, because we're doing it as fun, the fun being executed even slightly commercially is at a level above what most people are doing even entrepreneurially with 100%, because that's what we do.
I think it always makes something richer to have some kind of value to it that isn't tied strictly to a profit motive. You know what I mean? So, which this definitely has. There's almost like an altruistic component to it.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Speaking of altruism, so the altruistic portion of Makule, and I guess it's a little bit of something that I can share that I think a lot of schools, martial arts schools, will identify with. I've been involved teaching for a long time, being, in the 5-0 club, like teaching folks from, I remember when they were literally toddlers to where they're now competing in UFC, BJJ, like to black belt to now they're Makule.
Right.
Like, because I was a coach at Shobukan Judo Club at 16 years old already. I had my black belt.
I kept saying that I wanted to dive deeper into that story, whatever it is. You have I feel like we haven't even begun to touch on like your background. So tell us a little bit about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's perfect because my background has, I think, provided me a bunch of strengths that I will, put into Makule Jiu-Jitsu, and they just perfectly fit in together. And then at least that way, I feel like some of my experiences and hardships that I've had, I can use it to add value to other people's lives. And I'm hoping that Makule captures that, but as far as my history.
Real quick before we get into that, can we stop for 2 seconds? I got to pee super bad.
Okay.
All right, and we're back. Sorry, I had to take a little restroom break. I have the bladder the size of a 9-year-old girl's. So.
No, the best advice, like I remember.
Never hold it. Wait.
Well, no. So I was in my 40s, and I was asking a friend of mine who was above 50. Like I said, oh man, what's the best advice you could give me? Like, you're a little further down the road than me. Like seriously, like a mentor to me. His name was Lyle. Worked at Anheuser-Busch on Oahu. He goes, Mark, he's a soft-spoken Japanese guy. Never miss an opportunity to use the bathroom. I was like, what is he talking about?
We've honored his tutelage today.
I'm telling you, man, I'm living the advice right now, man. So like whenever there's
back to Makule Jiu-Jitsu, it is great from a health perspective to not hold it. Like, you don't want to get kidney stones or
100%. And from riding motorcycles, you never ride with a full bladder.
Really?
The reason for it is because if you get into an accident, that's the thing that kills you.
Really?
Yeah, because you always hit the tank or the bars, your bladder explodes and you infect. That's actually what kills tidbit. You. Yeah. No, really, it's not. It's usually not the impact. It's the infection caused by bladder explosion. Jesus. Right. So don't ride with a full bladder.
I was just gonna say, I was gonna guess that it was something. I don't want to call it silly, but like, oh well, you don't want to have a full bladder if you get in an accident on a motorcycle because you don't want to piss yourself and have the paramedics find you that way. There's actually a very functional health.
Well, it is kind of that. It's you don't want to internally piss yourself.
What? Yeah, exactly, and kill yourself as a result. So,
yeah, apparently.
So a lot more dire and serious than I had originally guessed, but. So anyway, before we left for our now well-detailed and described bathroom break, we were getting into your history, and was fascinated to hear just like 5 minutes of your backstory when you guys were creating content last week and I was helping film it. So I wanted to dive deeper into that and find out, because I knew you had a background in judo and you were very well respected in that community in Hawaii and helped run Shobukan or whatever it was. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Shobukan was one of the academies that
well respected, but maybe known to certain people, from back in the
okay. But I mean,
I might be a name associated with a certain era.
That community, the judo community in Hawaii, was always one of the more respected communities, I feel like, outside of Japan itself, right? And that school specifically, the one that you were affiliated with, was the one in Hawaii that was producing Olympic medalists and.
Oh yeah, well, Shobu. So I mean, it's when it comes to my martial arts history, it's like
walk us through it. What was the first?
Well,
like from childhood on.
We talked a little bit about my childhood, like born on Oahu and I moved to Kauai, right?
Yeah.
And then when I moved to Kauai, and this is like first, second grade, somewhere thereabouts. Like I said, I spoke standard English, and because I didn't speak pidgin, it was either fight or get my lunch money taken, right? So I fought, and then because I was fighting a lot, and maybe I was winning a lot too, and even if I lost, I thought I won, so it didn't matter, in my head.
Right, I was a legend in my own mind.
Yeah, and so my dad and my mom decided, because at the nearby church they were offering some martial arts classes, Aikido classes.
Okay, and
Aikido is kind of a segue for like the older judo folks went into, but back then you're talking 70s, right? Every martial art had a stigma. None of them had been tested against each other, so no one would know the difference if Aikido was stronger than Karate, which was stronger than. All they know is it's a martial arts, and there was a mystery and a mystique to it, back then. So my parents put me into Aikido. You would think, because they knew their son was going to get into fights, so he could defend himself. Absolutely not. They knew that their son loved fighting. The first time somebody tried to take my lunch money, I was like, this is better than kickball. And I remember his name was Kennison Hanohano, and we actually became really good friends. Funny how that works out. Anytime you fight with somebody, usually you wind up best friends after the fight. Yeah, it brings you together if you survive it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And if you look at I think it's my second grade picture or whatever it might be, you'll see and I still have some of those marks on my face. You'll see his fingernail marks, and my mom was crying and crying because I remember mounting him, and this is just I tackled him like Gracie Jiu-Jitsu says, most fights wind up on the ground.
+% of the fights.
I remember him holding my lunch money because he didn't want to give it back, and I was sitting on his chest and I was punching him, and because there's no taught mount defense or escape for a guy that even he is just a young little kid too. He reached up and grabbed my face and was holding me. I was like Mongolian chopping him, right? And that's a Sakuraba.
Yeah, double hands.
So I'm like Mongolian chopping him. He's doing this, and at the end of the day, he didn't look bad because I couldn't hit hard. I was a little kid, but my face had all these fingernail scratch marks, right? And my mom was like, "Oh my gosh," crying and crying, like the picture. So I have proof of that fight because if you ever look at my elementary school picture from second grade,
right before class picture day.
Disaster. Yeah, it was right. Yeah, it was the first day of school. Second day of school is class
picture day.
Yep. So that was my introduction.
Okay.
To that particular school. Long story short.
Trial initiation by fire.
Right. So they put me in martial arts not to defend myself, but to because it was like he needs to learn.
You went the Bruce Lee story route. Like you're getting in too many fights and he ends up with the Yip Man, right?
It's their fault for teaching me standard English and reinforcing proper English at home.
Shame on
because they did that, it got me into a whole lot of fights. So.
Trivia tidbit. Sorry, not to interject, but now Pidgin English is actually considered an official language. So if you say you can speak Pidgin, that means along with regular English, you speak 2 languages at least. So
yeah, and no surprise that they score so low on everything, and then they can't get a job and need handouts because they can't speak or write. Sad, really, but that's a fact. Whether you
not to digress
it or not, but anyway, so back to the fighting. So I got enrolled in Aikido
first, right?
Yeah, right. So that was at a elementary school age. And but by my family history is judo. And you had asked about Shobukan Judo Club and history.
So your family had an affiliation with a different school, right?
Right. So there's actually some drama in my past. It's kind of funny, and it's the typical thing. So Makule Jiu-Jitsu kind of prevented some of it. or I mean, like the idea behind Makuli Jiu-Jitsu would have prevented some of what's happening. And that's kind of like,
if that theoretically existed as a concept back then.
yeah, if the Makuli Jiu-Jitsu, the stuff that we're going to push through existed then, I don't think you would have seen as much of what has happened and how people quit martial arts happening. Yeah, because
the politics involved.
Age, and someday I'll get back to how that ties all together. Right now, it seems like
I have some very strong opinions about the politics in the martial arts universe as well.
Right. So back to judo in Hawaii. So judo in Hawaii was like the first place that judo was, quote, authorized outside of Japan.
Yeah, right.
And it's because two places in the world received the majority of Japanese immigrants, right? It's Brazil and Hawaii. That was it, you know. Then so Hawaii started a judo school with folks that had come over from, you know, the homeland, right? And wanted to have a place to practice judo. So 3 different schools opened there from what I understand. One was like, I think it was like Boys and Girls Club. The other 2 were Shinyon-kan and Shobukan Judo Club, of which Jigoro Kano, who's like the founder of judo, came to Hawaii to actually bless the schools. Or he even like, and to this day, both Shinyon-kan and Shobukan have the handwritten signs by Jigoro Kano. They engraved it eventually, but it, like, if you go into Shobukan, I know this for sure, the handwritten kanji for Shobukan is in a glass frame right at the top. Right.
When did that first happen? Like, was that like in the 50s or something, or?
Oh no, it would be later. I think 70s? It would be prior. No,
before the 50s
came. Yeah, probably.
Wow.
I think it was probably maybe actually no, it was pre-war.
Wow.
Too, yeah. So this was like early 20th century type of thing.
Incredible.
In the early 1900s, I think. So, long story short, there was Shobukan Club that had that Shobukan Judo Club, and then Shinyon-kan Judo Club, which eventually was my family's judo club. We weren't, from what I understand, not the initial founders, but my grandfather, my dad's dad, was the head instructor there. He went as a student to Shinyon-kan Judo Club. So when it opened, he went up the ranks and eventually became head.
He was there from the very beginning, from when it first opened. Around then. Wow.
As a kid. So he's born and bred Shinyon-kan, right? So he became Shinyon-kan, eventually became the head instructor there. So my dad, being the son of the head instructor, was forced to take judo. That was a bit of a contentious thing. You know how it goes back in the day, like, especially then you're carrying the moniker of, I'm the pastor's kid, so to speak, right? So they have to follow in the footsteps. So my dad was made to do that. And he went up to brown belt, and I believe in his black belt tournament, he threw his shoulder out, you know, and was still made to compete. Back then, Japanese, it's still like that in Japan, where it doesn't matter if you blow your knee out, you die. You die in the ring. Yeah, it's still kind of has that mentality.
I mean, this is a culture that would kill them. The entire family would kill themselves if they didn't get into school, right?
It's ingrained in the Japanese culture. Yeah. We don't have to go into the dark parts of Japanese culture, but there's
That's episode 7.
There's a dedication and intensity in Japanese culture that back in the turn of the century, when they were first generation from pre-war Japan, where they still worship the emperor and stuff. Yeah, there's a level of commitment that I don't think we know in this day and age. But my dad did do that and was forced to do it to the point where he got injured, competed, and didn't get his black belt, because after that tournament, I believe this was it, he quit. My dad doesn't share too much about it, just that he didn't like.
You just know that ended at that time.
And he'll always say, your grandfather was really, really good at judo. Obviously, right? You know, that kind of thing.
Head instructor.
But my dad quit, and my mom is actually, because my dad would never tell me, but he told my mom why he quit, you know, that whole thing.
Right.
And my mom's always shared is because of the pressure that he was, you know, forced
being the son of
even being injured and everything. And a lot of what I learned about my dad's judo was through my instructor, who was a head instructor of Shobukan Judo Club, Migita, Lloyd Migita, you know, and his dad was like the founder / you know, one of the very first charter members of Shobukan Judo Club. So why was I at Shobukan and not Shinyon-kan? And that ties a little bit to our
inquiring minds want to know.
Right. So I mean, you know, just to keep the long story short, you heard about black belt theater. From Aikido, where I learned how to roll and fall, it does teach you how to do those things very, very well. We eventually moved back to Oahu in 7th grade. And the story behind that is my mom asked me in 6th grade, you know, Mark, now that you're graduating elementary school, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, I want to be, that's easy, Mom. I want to be a pro surfer. right? You know that.
I mean, I'm only laughing because I felt the same exact way.
Right. And then my mom was like, wrong
yeah.
answer.
Negative.
She turns to my dad. We're moving back to Oahu immediately. I don't care if you have to quit your job or what, but that my kid's not going to be growing weed and surfing because that's what you do in Kauai. You fight, you fish, you hunt, you surf, and eventually after adolescence, you the other F. You know what I mean? Like, and it's all about whip. You know, like the girls and stuff, and you start early there. I mean, you really do. Like a lot of young. Anyway, with no judgment because I love them.
Right.
I still consider myself from there, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Right? Because my childhood years were there. That's how I think. I'm a Hawaiian redneck.
Formidable years.
I might still use standard English, but I still like to finish things and like settle things with my fist.
Right.
And that's where I go immediately. Like I still am Kauai through and through.
Nothing wrong with that.
Back to the story. So we moved back to Oahu, and this is during
because of that though. That was the
absolutely because of that.
That's amazing.
100% because of that. Almost had a nervous breakdown when that happened because I was like, you know,
awesome.
All my friends are there. I learned to surf when I was in third grade.
Yeah.
I could surf. I was standing up hitting cubes down at Kalapaki Beach and out on the wall. Like, that's why, like, when people go, yeah, the Iron Brothers come from Kauai, I go, of course they come from Kauai. Like, dude, you either drown or you learn how to surf because you're not going to be the guy that doesn't know how. You know what I mean? Like, or can't fish, can't hunt. You want to have your lunch money taken every day? Don't do any of those things.
Right.
Don't do that and try and grow up in Kauai and see what happens.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Live on the other side of that.
Right. So everybody does it well, usually, right? So back to topic. So we moved to Oahu. Black belt theater is going strong, right? Like, you know, Friday nights. So I begged my parents, I'm like, please don't make me go back into any other form of martial art. I want to take Kung Fu. My dad's like, well, you know, as long as you're in martial arts, fine. So I go and enroll at the Chinese Cultural, Physical Cultural Center down on Nuano Avenue. It's right where the 7-Eleven is, that little temple there. And so I start to learn Kung Fu.
What style of Kung Fu were they teaching them? Was it like
it's
Wing
the one
Chun
that Jet Li does. What does he do?
Jet Li?
No. It's the one from Ip Man.
Oh, Wing Chun.
Yeah, Wing Chun, but there's another name they call it, I think.
Really?
It's not Jeet Kune Do. Yeah, there's something in between. Anyway, long story short, it was Sifu Chun back then.
Okay.
And so I was taking that for a couple of years. And while I was taking Kung Fu, my best friend in high school, Ross Migita, son of Migita Sensei, Lloyd Migita, was like, hey, Mark, you should come to Judo. You'd have fun. You should come to Judo. And finally I go, Judo is great and all, but Kung Fu is like how real people learn how to fight, right? So we had a little friendly sparring session and he threw me and held me down. I couldn't get up. And then the whole pressure of the family from Judo and that whole thing. And so I went down and I started because he's my best friend, right? So
you went down to Shobukan and started
Shobukan and like
and not at Shunyokan.
No, because
which is also on Oahu though.
Yeah, Oahu. Okay. Yeah. So, honestly, because of my dad's falling out with the whole thing or whatever, I had no real.
Didn't seem like
he didn't feel like he needed to take me to show.
You didn't feel obligated to have to go there.
Yeah, although had I asked him in 7th grade, prior to Black Belt Theater and prior to my friend Ross, if I said, Dad, I want to take judo, there's a strong likelihood he would have probably just driven me right to Shunyokan, right? But that never happened, and my dad was definitely not going to push me into judo, right? Mm-hmm. So I just went with Ross to practice, and at the time Shobukan was highly competitive. Mm-hmm. We had the Tsunada brothers, we had a whole bunch of like people that were eventually either went to the Olympics or were like U.S. champs and all these type of things, super competitive dojo. And I got involved with that, and I just thrived and loved competition. So I was Shobukan through and through while I was there as a young, and because a lot of my counterparts there had started a lot younger than me, they were much higher rank and they could beat the crap out of me. We had a visitor from Japan, Nakano Sensei from Tokuyama University. He was on the 1980 Moscow Olympic team, of which, as you know, Japan boycotted. So he lost his opportunity for fame in Japan because of that.
Wow.
That's another story. Yeah. But he saw me getting beaten up, but kept coming back. So he invited me to Japan. And so I think my 8th grade summer after that, I went to Japan. My grandfather paid for me to go on a trip and just live there for pulled me out of school a little early that year, sent me there, was there all the way through the end of summer. So 3-4 months or whatever it was, where I learned to speak Japanese. Because
I was going to ask, is that where you learned? Because you speak Japanese too. So.
I do now. Well, after that experience, so basically it was like I had to go live in a judo ryo, as they call it, which is a dormitory for judo. in the university, and I was just a young kid, but because he was the instructor there, he just had me there, also practicing with the high school, of which down in the South, they spoke no English. If you don't speak, and here it is a pidgin, like a standard English pidgin start, because I spoke no Japanese. Guess what they did to me while I was down there?
Took your lunch money.
Ross brought me to Shobukan, where I started to develop my judo through Shobukan, and I got discovered by my judo sensei, Nakano sensei from Tokuyama University, and he brought me to Japan in my 8th grade year. So that is where I learned Japanese, because I didn't speak it then. But after getting my butt kicked for a few months because I didn't speak Japanese, weird. It's like POWs in Vietnam. You learn how to speak the native language real quick.
How long were you there?
Initially, it was like 4 months.
Okay.
Like 3 to 4 months, I think I was there. Yeah. So
quick to be learning the language.
Oh, you learn it real fast. But when you're younger though, in that age,
they say that, right?
Language, yeah. You just pick it up so fast and you don't forget.
But I've heard people try to debunk that too and say that that's bullshit. It actually,
okay, then it could have to do with my super high IQ.
Yeah, I probably would attribute it more to that.
Yeah, no.
Although I can't learn a new language.
It's just because I was getting my butt kicked at the time, and I learned it
out of necessity.
And I've told other people this because I've studied a few more languages since then, right?
Right. Yeah.
Learned to speak it. The languages that I struggle with the most, my heart is closed to it. Like, I don't really love it. I don't think it's pretty. There's nothing I find attractive
that's a whole
about
other
the
topic
culture.
of conversation.
Yeah, but I had to learn it for survival, right? Whereas if I really love the culture, the people, the food, all of a sudden I learned the language way faster.
But I think that's education in general. Like, if you're interested in a topic, you will learn it better, faster, become smarter in it, whatever it is. I think the emotional investment.
It's the emotional opening though, because if you don't have the emotional, like intellectually, I can understand why I had to learn Mandarin. Like that's one of the languages that I, still struggle with, but try to learn and can speak a bit, today. Like I've never had my heart open to it because there's so many cultural things that for me I struggle with in China that never fully allows me to love it, and whereas, for example, I just started studying Italian and Spanish. Like what is there not to love about it? So like even in the short time I've been learning it, I've been learning to speak it actually pretty quickly, and I watch all the Instagrams in that language and all that fun stuff. But but back to Japanese, I truly loved it. Like when I got there, I found a thing like safety there that I didn't feel like I had in America or in Hawaii. There's certain things as a kid too, especially growing up in the 80s. I'm like, I don't have to worry about looking over my shoulder or, getting mobbed or any of that type of thing.
Yeah, I didn't find that out till I was an adult, but I was fascinated when I did find that out, that it's like, a 5-year-old kid will hop on 3 different trains and go 20 different miles by themselves to get to school and not worry at all about being abducted or any kind of danger.
And in 8th or 9th grade, that's, just so comforting that like my heart completely open to that country, to the point where like even now I'm contemplating retirement and I will live there. Like I told you, I'm going to
thinking about it too.
A good portion of the year, not summer, but part of winter, so I can ride while I'm there. And I will probably get a small little place in Japan. But back to the martial arts story. Yeah. So I was going through judo, coming up in it and doing everything I thought right. Japan, going there and studying gave me a big jumps like ahead, because Japanese judo is at a different level. It's just taught differently, it's practiced differently. Everybody there's fantastic, that type of, especially down south. So I got this little warp drive to where when I came back, now I'm like competitive, let's say, with the rest of the
you're hanging with the big
competitors at Shobukan. And because of my relationship with Ross, they became very, very close family friends with me. I considered Mr. Migita or Migita Sensei like an uncle or father. So I'm loyal to them. And they put me in for my black belt test. And that's when I found out that there was some resentment because I was competing on the local circuit a lot. And apparently I was fairly successful, competing in judo. And that means that somebody else was not so successful who might have been going up against me. And if they represented a school, particularly a school that was my family's school, there might be at the old timer Japanese level, because it's never the young folks too much. It's always old Japanese folks. I hate to sound this, but I am Japanese, so I can say this. It's entrenched.
Now that we're old Japanese,
where there's they have this little bit, this traitor, that type of thing. Right? I mean, even in Brazilian, they say creante, right? Like it's the same thing. So, the head instructor there, who was my cousin's dad, tried to block when I did my kata test at Shunyokan because that was where the kata was performed. He tried to fail me. And I think Migita Sensei, from what I understand, to argue and that whole thing to get it through. I think eventually we're able to get it through. And the funny part was the initial black belt I earned was in Japan that summer. I actually earned a
you got a black belt while you were there.
But I had to be put in for my Kodokan certification through the Hawaii Yudanshikai, that I belong to, of which I got blocked. By guess who? Yeah.
By your own
family, right. So that's the history of that. Long story short, I love them, and I hope that I can go back and actually help Shunyokan when I go back, like teach there and do that whole thing. Because, Shobukan has kind of evolved and done their own thing now and maybe evolved away from me to a degree, which is fine. I'll always love it. And if they invite me, I'll always, come and help. But I'd like to maybe, because of the family obligatory thing, and things have been long squashed.
How old were you when you got the black belt in
Japan?
Okay, in Japan, and then when you finally got it pushed through in Hawaii,
like 14 or so in Japan. But mind you, down south there it was. If I recall, the schools I went to was just like white to black. They would just go white, and then you would be.
They didn't have the McDonald's belt.
So they would test. They would kata test and everything. Yeah. So it's usually around 7th, 8th grade. Kids were getting their black belt.
Okay.
But
how long a stretch of time is that from white to black?
I'm not
average.
Sure. I'm not sure, but I know they were taking from elementary school, so it's got to be years. You know what I mean?
Right.
I will say this though, like in defense of the whole, like, oh, my kid's an 8-year-old black belt, and they get wiped out. The black belts in Japan that were like 14 years old, I'm gonna tell you right now, I could put them into a high school gym or a college gym in America.
People would be flying.
Yeah. So there was a legitimacy to it. I mean, could there be a guy that you could blast through in Japan? Yeah, of course. But I
get what you're saying though. It was legit.
Oh yeah, you go to a Japanese dojo. Good luck.
So teenager, when you get your black belt in judo, tell me how you went from there to discovering jiu-jitsu and.
So
that's probably quite a bit of time in between,
Barrett.
Right?
Barrett. Well, yeah, there's a bit of time. I'd gone into the Air Force. Went to college, quit, and because of a girlfriend type of thing, went into the Air Force. Came back in the '90s. During the '90s, I'm like, finally, I'm gonna get back into judo. So I started going back to Shobukan. At the time, guess what? A guy by the name of Barrett Yoshida, who we talked about earlier, and Michael and Zuko were going to Shobukan to learn their takedown, to improve their takedown game, so they could be more successful in jiu-jitsu tournaments.
Cross training.
And I basically regarded myself as strong on the mat. And when I faced Mike and Barrett, thank God I was 50 pounds heavier than them, straight muscle. In the 3 minutes that I had, I barely survived not getting choked out. I ran the whole time, right? So at that point, rather than many people were like, that developed resentment against it, I was like, I can't believe I've studied what I thought was the same martial art for all these years, and I almost got killed. I need to learn it. So
how big a component was the Newaza part of the game in judo at that time?
It was always part of the game, but it was always part of the game, but it was never that massive because the match can end by throwing an opponent on their back.
For anyone watching that doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about, Newaza refers to the submissions portion of the
the grappling on the ground
aspect,
portion,
right?
not the standing part, but the mat work they call it, right?
Right.
And there's another word they use, or another thing it means in Japan when you say Newaza, if you tell it to a Nechang, but anyway, so. back to topic though, but yeah, so that's how I got introduced to it. And because at the time I was young and broke, basically I traded teaching judo at Mike's school O2 for lessons.
Oh really?
So I could
so that's how you started.
More or less.
Okay.
Yeah, that was how I started. And then through that I kind of met Barrett because I'd been friends with the Inoue too, so there was a split. And
Barrett was started in a Helson affiliated universe, right? And then switched at some point too.
He was
right.
Helson's one of Helson's.
He's sort of like one of his gatekeepers and enforcers. Right?
Yeah. So I mean, and Barrett will be the first to tell you that's where he got his start. It was unfortunate, that's a whole nother episode. If we had more time, obviously we could go into that whole story. But that is my judo background, and then to jiu-jitsu, and then of course jiu-jitsu is many years in there. So let's say I started, got introduced to it in the late '90s.
I think your jiu-jitsu story we will transition to it as part of a conversation with another episode. But I wanted to know what led us to you getting to the jiu-jitsu doorstep, because I knew it wasn't just jiu-jitsu, and I knew you had a black belt in judo as well. And
right.
And
because of that though, you want to come full circle. Because of the jiu-jitsu, it brought us together.
Yeah, I met you. I was, once again, I kind of owe a lot to Higan in that sense, because he is such a legend in the jiu-jitsu universe and one of the godfathers of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and is very well respected in that community. I was moving back to Hawaii kind of only a few years after I had started jiu-jitsu. I was already considered Hegan one of my best friends, and Hegan was. I was surprised that they asked, but he had pulled me aside and was like, "We don't have a Machado school in Hawaii, but you need to continue to represent the Machado family." And I had, up to that point, like, he had basically sort of in trade for some stuff that my company from the skateboard universe had done for him, like posters for tournaments and that kind of stuff. Like, we just basically traded, and instead of paying a tuition, I was allowed to just train there. But he had also given me a lot of private instruction. So I felt I have this sort of, I guess, opinion about that jiu-jitsu universe, which is controversial amongst some of our, friends that are mutual friends that I've grown up with in this universe. And I always felt like, if I'm paying you for jiu-jitsu, like, I don't owe you nothing. Like, I can go train wherever I want, do whatever I want. I don't care about the Creonch label or whatever and all that stuff. I had never given Hegan a dime. So when he asked me to continue to represent him, I was like, oh, I owe that guy something, and so I was happy to do that. I didn't realize how sort of lame politically, jiu-jitsu was. And I hadn't thought about that part of it. But I was surprised when I got back to Hawaii that nobody, I guess because he wasn't there in spirit competing with anyone from a professional level on a business level, because there were no Machado schools. And I had made it clear that I had no intention of opening a school at some point down the road to compete against them. I was not a threat, in the political or professional universe. So I was very much welcomed with open arms and was very grateful for that by everybody, by the Onzukas and by you guys. And I was kind of given carte blanche and allowed to just train wherever, because I wasn't going to be a threat.
Yeah, you were a big deal from the beginning.
I was, once again, spoiled brat in the jiu-jitsu universe. I was very lucky to get.
And you are a Hegan Machado black belt, especially now.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, one of the first people I met was BJ Penn from that universe, and Hegan had told me about him before I got back there. And he's like, "Hey, have you ever run into this guy?" I tell him, I said hello. He trained with me a couple of times, and he's amazing. Like, you'll be so impressed. And I did run into him. I think it was like compadres at Restaurant Row back in the day. Remember?
Yeah.
And I was like, "Hey, I know you don't know who I am, but my coach told me if I ever ran into you that I got to say what's up." And he's like, "Oh, who's your coach?" I was like, "Oh, Hegan Machado." And he's like, "Holy shit, Hegan Machado's your coach." He's like, "You got to come train with us." And so kind of,
we got to get Hegan here.
Yeah, for sure. We got to do that. But anyway, we are starting to run out of time, so I think we should wrap up the conversation. Any last things we want to sort of like rubber stamp as far as the Makula Jiu-Jitsu conversation, or do we have URLs yet? Do you have any social media stuff? If we don't have it as of the filming of this, then I'll make sure that it's included in the show notes.
We do. We have makulajujitsu.com. We have our Makula Jiu-Jitsu Instagram, Makula Jiu-Jitsu Facebook. But, if you just check out right now, like, I'm using my personal, Mark is back in SoCal, Instagram, and Mark Goes to Cali Facebook. I'll link all of that stuff together.
Okay, and we'll make sure that it's in the show notes. Makula is spelled Makule.
That's it.
JIUJITSU.
That's it. Yeah.
So yeah, look for that, and we will be doing a lot more promoting of that and working on our next guests. So
I can't wait
for the next episode.
I can't wait. This is going to be great, man.
Big shout out to Christian Podcast Studio for hosting us today and allowing us to use their beautiful space. So much appreciation.
We wouldn't be anywhere without Jesus Christ. I can tell you. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, brother. Appreciate your time today. Looking forward to the next one.
My man.
Beginning of much to come.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.